Order the regular meeting of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education. We're reconvening to open session. May I have a roll call?
Superintendent Wells. Here. President Trutain.
Here.
Vice President Doss.
Here.
Trustee Clark.
Here.
Trustee Hinckley.
Here.
Trustee Duran.
Here.
Student Board Member Weinstein. Here. Student Board Member Mulla.
Here.
Thank you.
We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Join if you like.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Student board members, would you read our mission and vision statement, please? And our meeting norms.
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Meeting norms. Maintain a focus on what is best for our students. Show respect, never dismiss or devalue others. Be willing to compromise. Disagree when necessary, agreeably. Make a commitment to effective deliberation, each one listening with an open mind, while others are allowed to express their points of view. Participate by building on the thoughts of a fellow board member. Make a commitment to open communication and honesty. No surprises. Commit the time necessary to govern effectively. Be collaborative. Maintain confidentiality, which leads to the building of trust. Look upon history as lessons learned. Focus on the present and the future.
Thank you so much. There was no action taken in closed session. And that moves us to item number 6, approval of the agenda. We do have a lengthy agenda tonight. We have a lot of work to do, and some of it's going to most of it's going to have to be done tonight. If any board member sees an item that they think could be tabled to a later meeting, we need to keep an open mind, because I think that we're scheduled to end at 10:20, and I would really like to make a commitment to end by 10:30, because a number of us have jobs that we need to go to tomorrow morning.
Is this the only time where we can ask for something to be moved?
Not at all. We can,
yeah. We can at another point, or should we all look at it right now real quick?
We can always table something during
yeah,
the meeting.
we can keep an eye on the time and table something later in the meeting. Given that, would someone like to move the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
Preemptive movement there. I will accept that. All right. So we've moved the agenda, and that brings us to the spotlight on Cornell Elementary School.
Because we had like a to approve it.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Heather Duncan. I'm the principal at Cornell, and it is absolutely my pleasure to step out of the limelight and introduce you to the wonderful intervention teachers at Cornell. The reason that we want to highlight our intervention program this year is I feel the intervention program at Cornell is the finest intervention program you could find anywhere. These teachers team together. While they'll probably tell you they have specific hats that they wear, I really think of them all as just intervention teachers, because they team together and work with me on a regular basis, and with our special education staff, and when we had a TSA, we have regular committed meetings to sitting down and looking at student progress, analyzing steps where we need to make improvements, partnering around how to flexibly group kids, and how to get all the kids the services that they need. And I'm going to let them talk a little bit more about that, but it has, in the past 5 years, evolved and changed each year. It's gotten deeper, broader, more competent and skillful. And And the programs that we've been able to implement and expand and change and revise have made significant impacts in our student teaching and learning, which you can absolutely see tangibly in the progress of our school and in the intangible things of the way that we see kids succeeding and accessing learning in their classrooms, in the way that they apply their learning, which you can't always see on paper. But you can see it in both ways at Cornell, and I'm incredibly proud of it, which is why I asked them if they would be willing to present their program to you tonight. So without further ado, Lisa Ta, Natalie Slattery, Tobias Bodine, they'll probably introduce themselves to you. And I'm actually going to sit down because you are the ones that are going to talk to them. So thank you very much.
Sure. So the quality of a school as a learning community can be measured by how effectively it addresses the needs of struggling students, and that's by Jim Wright.
So Heather Duncan, she's our principal. She's part of our intervention team.
Lisa Ta.
And I'm Natalie Slattery. I do reading intervention. I love to run, and I have chickens that I follow around when I get home from work.
My name is Tobias Bodine, and I've been working at Cornell School since 2011. And I have done math club, reading intervention, and currently am the ELD coordinator for Cornell School. So our intervention objectives, to sum it up, is to help students that may be struggling. So we try to meet students where they are at. So regardless of what their scores are, how they might have been perceived, we try to find out where they are in the academic continuum. We use assessment data to determine their needs, so that means multiple assessments throughout the year. We also select and implement curriculum, and there's a lot of that, as you'll see later on in this slideshow. We use direct instruction primarily to target and work successfully with the small groups. And we work to develop and maintain student proficiency and fluency in all areas of English language arts, ELD, and math.
So we use strategies and explicit instruction to teach students specific skills. So some of the things we're trying to do are language awareness, coding, word attack skills for multisyllabic words, vocabulary development, reading comprehension, reading fluency, grammar and syntax, and then for math, we're looking at number fluency and number sense. So that entails a lot of hands-on activities, just bringing in all resources that we have.
So we aren't just intervention teachers. There's a multitude of services that we're providing at Cornell. One big part of that is the administration of student assessments, as well as the research, the analysis, and the recommendation of interventions for those students when we're looking at the assessment results. We also do some teacher support where we're modeling lessons. Okay. We consult on these student assessments, progress, and areas of needed support. We do that with both teachers as well as para-educators and put together plans for students. We also conduct professional development at staff meetings and professional development days. And we facilitate and attend the student success team meetings, do the planning around those, as well as plan, facilitate, and direct the English Language Learner Advisory Committee meetings with parents and staff. So it's a really dynamic position, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much, because you have a lot of different areas that you're working.
And this picture was taken in my classroom, up here? Okay. Oh,
You're just going to shout.
Okay, all right. We got to do the MC thing. All right, so yeah, this is a picture that I took in my classroom last week of doing a what I call a super sort with the Words Their Way curriculum, where we took 3 different word sorts, and these are all English learner students, and we were looking at spelling patterns in English. This is me. Okay, great. All right. So how we determine our services? Well, we have to look at a lot of data. And obviously, you know some of these acronyms here, like KASP, also known as the SBAC, the district benchmark assessments. That's another acronym right there, DBA. for both math and English language arts. Founders in Pinnell, it's called FNP. That reading assessment, which was just adopted last year, we helped teachers to administer that. The phonological awareness skills test passed. I think they know more about that than I do, but we're gonna implement that much more this year. Diagnostic assessment of reading, that's been around since I've been in the district, and that's usually something that's used for students that have been identified as struggling. The core phonics survey, which has been around for quite a while. And then, of course, the English language proficiency assessments, or LPAC, which this year is going to start being online on computers, which is going to be a big shift for us. The LPAC takes the place of what used to be called the CELT. Do the math module assessments, that's our math intervention program. And then, of course, teacher recommendation, as well as administrator recommendation.
So we have a multitude of curricular materials that we use for our instruction. And one thing that I think is best about our program is that we actually look at all of that data that we just were talking about. We look at our particular skill sets, at what we're really good at teaching and how we teach. And then we also look at what the students' areas of needs are, and we fluidly move students between our groups. And we're constantly checking in and evaluating where students are, what kind of progress they've made, and moving them based on what their needs are. We've also secured a couple different grants that have gotten us the Barton, or it's an Orton-Gillingham approach for struggling readers. We have level literacy intervention, which is closely tied to our Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessments. We also have systematic instruction in phonological awareness, phonics and sight words, SIPs. And we also use materials like Rhyme Magic, Foundations, a fluency and comprehension curriculum called Read Naturally, and then we also use leveled books. And that's in addition to all of the other curriculum and materials that we bring in with just our expertise and our knowledge from the years that we've been teaching as well. So it's a really dynamic approach to what students need and what curriculum is going to be best for them.
And just to point out, in this picture, mentor sentences is something that I know Ocean View has used for intervention, and we use that occasionally as well. So our curricular materials, which you saw in that last picture for English language development, include the English language arts materials. So that would be the reading and writing curricula that have recently been adopted. We also have On Our Way to English, which is from the Rigby Company. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the state has not given us great ELD curriculum, in my opinion. I'm going to express my opinion about that, for us to move forward with the new standards, the new ELD standards that were adopted in 2012. What we do is we use materials such as Avenues, which was a previous adoption for ELD, and then you'll see on one of the next slides some of the other materials we use.
For math, we use Do the Math, which is by Marilyn Burns. We also use hands-on activities and games with manipulatives and visuals, reteaching concepts learned in class. So a lot of it, it's reviewing things that students are having difficulty with, and then scaffolding, how can they solve the problems.
So children who enter the primary grades with significant barriers to learning, such as gaps in their reading skills, are significantly at higher risk of poor school performance than their non-struggling peers. And that, again, is another quote by Jim Wright.
It's a big concept. So as interventionists, we strive to make the curriculum accessible to all of our students and to turn student academic struggles into student academic successes. And so that means getting kids out of our program. And making it so that they no longer need us, but can independently be successful.
That looks like it. Oh wow, we cut some of the slides out. Awesome. All right. Well, we want to thank you for your attention and for inviting us here.
They might have some questions.
Yeah. Let's see if we have any questions here. That's we're good at making up answers.
Or something nice they want to say.
Board Member Malak?
Yeah, well, what you're doing sounds really great, and I'm sure it's dramatically helping the students. I was wondering how much one-on-one it is versus a whole class.
Yeah, I mean, that really depends on what the needs are of the students and what the groups look like and what the schedules look like. So, for instance, I work with 3 students one-on-one, but then I also have groups of 4 and 5, and then when you get up into the math, you even have groups of maybe even 6 or 7, I think, in the math, right? But when you're doing intervention with students, because their needs are often so specific, you really don't want to get groups that are too large, because what I've found with my instruction when the groups are too large is that I'm kind of doing as much as I can do for the whole group, rather doing intense concentrated work with a smaller group, and I find that I can actually move students out more quickly when I have concentrated intensives in smaller groups.
For students with individual education plans, so IEPs, it's sometimes written in there that they get one-on-one. So that's certainly true for several of my English learners. Any other questions?
A couple of questions. I'll mention them all together. So it's primarily a pull-out program as opposed to in-classroom instruction is one question. Do you start at kindergarten? And how do you determine when the students are ready to go back and just be integrated totally into the total classroom instruction?
So I can start with your second question, which is we actually do start at kindergarten. I'm the primary lead on that. I work at the beginning of the year with students that are English learners, and then before the midway point of the year, I get together with the kindergarten teachers and we start to identify even non-English learners that need help with phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and that sort of thing. So we actually do provide intervention in kindergarten, I'm happy to say. It tends to be in English language arts. We have the resources for math intervention for kindergarten, but we serve all grades, K through 5. And then, let's see, other questions? Can you just repeat them? Push in and pull out.
So my services are push-in as well as pull-out. It's the majority of pull-out services, though. Push-in services tend to you kind of work them in between when you have slots that are a little bit more open. That at least is how I've been working. And a couple of years ago, I was doing more push-in support as well. But that's, again, something that it changes with need and with students and classrooms.
One of the barriers to push-in is coordinating with teachers. There just does not seem to be enough time during the day to sit down and say, okay, tomorrow we're going to work with this group in this way. It can be a little jarring for somebody to come in and in the middle of a lesson and try to pull a student aside in the whole group. But we do that, especially when we've been implementing new curriculum. We were doing a little bit more push-in, but consistently over the years, we've tried it, and what there seems to be lacking is time for coordination. And then you had a third question.
Which is your determination for when they're fully back into the classroom and no longer needing your specific support.
So for determining whether or not they're ready to go back into the classroom, we'll look at assessment. So we'll reevaluate them after a period of time. If they're at grade level, then they're ready to go back. And so some of that may be, like today I did a running record on someone, and she was one of my first graders who wasn't doing so hot at the beginning, and she's ready to leave. And so it also means continuing to progress monitor how they're doing, checking in with the teacher. And sometimes you exit kids, and then maybe a few months later the teacher will say, you know what, can you take so-and-so back? I'm having difficulty.
And I should say, just to springboard off what we were talking about, push in, pull out, the vast majority of our students in ELD are actually getting ELD instruction in the classroom. Pull out is such a small number of the English learners that I see are pullouts, and that's because every teacher in California is required to teach, to be able to teach ELD, and that's part of their training. So you saw before some of the curricular materials there, and we talked about all those assessments. That's what we use. And then we sometimes have to work with the teachers to find a plan to integrate that student back in if they've been getting pull-out, and to actually think strategically about it instead of just pushing them back in and then hoping they don't come back to us. But we find that our teachers are very, very amenable to that. But we do have to, we have to be thoughtful about that. And it's exciting to see students back into the classroom and be successful. I'm imagining a couple students right now that were with me last year. I haven't seen them at all this year. So, any
Other board questions?
see that's Ryan? Yeah.
The only question I have, is there like how do you report back as far as like how students are doing to their parents?
Yeah, well, during conference weeks. That's, we have twice a year. We have these conferences that take quite a bit of chunk. It's a couple weeks. And that's one of the primary places that we do it. I know for myself, my email is available. If parents want to contact me, they can. I try to establish a relationship with the parents so that they know what's going on. But it seems to me, in my experience, it's at conference time. That's when we communicate the most about that.
We also communicate and give an update on progress with all of the report cards as well. And that's every trimester.
I just wanted to say thank you for an amazing presentation. I think the kids that you teach are very lucky, and the parents, if they get to see this on the video, would be so impressed with the thought and the effort that goes into planning these interventions for their children. So thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Spotlight is always the funnest part of our meeting. And now we move on to the consent calendar. Are there any items that would like to be discussed separately in the consent?
Madam Chair, can I request that we pull item 8.5 from the consent for discussion?
Yes, so we'll discuss item 8-5 before we move the consent calendar. Is there anything else? Boy, how about 8-4? Is that an item that needs to be dealt with separately? I thought that there was going to be a reading of that resolution.
Oh, yes, it would be.
Okay, well then now would be the time.
Oh, okay. Ladies, pueden ayudarme en leer esto? Okay, so the resolution. You have to go to the resolution. Should we do two each?
Resolution number, I'll start where I was. Whereas since January 2017, there has been an alarming increase in fringe ideologies using hatred as a means of intimidation. And whereas numerous policy positions from wanting to build a wall to most recently separating families at the border, combined with the actions and rhetoric of the president, have fueled the normalization of hateful and racist discourse. And
Whereas attacks on immigrants, Muslims, people of color, women, Jewish people, the LGBTQ plus community, and our most vulnerable are now more frequent, resulting in an uptick in hate crimes and the open promotion of xenophobic ideas. And whereas places of worship, including synagogues, churches, and mosques, as well as festivals, shopping malls, and nightclubs have become targets of white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and other espousing hatred. And
Whereas in 2018, in response to the numerous events and to clearly state our shared values, Berkeley developed the Berkeley Stands United Against Hate campaign, which was adopted by the city of Albany, as well as several other cities in the Bay Area, and served as a uniting and hopeful beacon amidst a challenging time, declaring our commitment to inclusivity. And whereas to further respond to the divide currently facing our nation, cities across the Bay Area are organizing the second United Against Hate Week that will take place November 17th through the 23rd, 2019. And
whereas events will focus on breaking through positionality, communicating in conflict, and working together to achieve common goals, promoting education, compassion, and cooperation, which are key to embracing differences between people. Therefore, the Albany Unified School District supports the City of Albany's proclamation of November 17th through 23rd as United Against Hate Week, and will support and encourage appropriate educational and community events.
That was wonderful. It was good to take a moment to hear that and reflect. I hope that after the United Against Hate Week that we get a chance to hear in some of the school newsletters about the activities that they performed. And that would bring us to discussing item 8-5, Independent Contractor Service Agreement between Albany Unified School District and Tamara Keller.
Oh, so I'd go on and dive in. I want to spend a moment or so to discuss the position of communication, realizing that communication is one of our district-wide goals, but we discovered that it's an unfunded goal, and yet we have a big hole that we need to fill. And typically, our neighboring communities, after doing some research, address this goal and fill their holes by having the stated expected duties, quarterly newsletter, summaries of board meetings distributed to both staff and community is typically done by a PIO, which stands for Public Information Officer, and they are costing the district upward of $200,000+. We have someone who's been doing this for us, some pieces of it for the community periodically, and I discovered that this person has a tremendous superior writing skill talent where they can take a big subject item and make it digestible and crystal clear. And so my aim was to try to fill this hole by recruiting Tamara for this consulting position, not to exceed $24,000, which is a fraction of what it would cost a PIO position. And so that's what I'm bringing before the board tonight for discussion and hopefully approval.
Board questions, comments?
Well, I have a couple questions and then comments. So the contract as presented just says $24,000. There's no itemization of an hourly rate or how many hours would be provided. Can you give us some details about what your ideas were?
Thank you. I can give you the facts as it relates to the question. More specifically, the hourly rate would be $40 an hour, not to exceed 600 hours, would equal $24,000, not to exceed $24,000 for the entire year.
So that's about how many hours a month? Sorry.
It depends on the project, but the safety net and stopgap is to not exceed $24,000 a year, but it's a maximum number of hours for the year of 600.
Any other board questions or comments?
We can move into my comments.
Okay, yeah, you go with your comments.
You know, I think communication is a really important goal for the district, obviously, and we've sometimes struggled to communicate effectively with the public. One of the things that we've been communicating a lot to the public recently is that we're in a structural deficit and we have a significant budget shortage. And so I'm concerned about when we do feel we have funding for an additional activity, I'd like to hear how that fits in with other district priorities. So for example, we've eliminated support in schools for certain things. And if we have funding for this, I guess I'm trying to understand what is our process for figuring out how we balance those needs, particularly as we're hoping to go to the community and say we need additional funding for our classrooms. We haven't had a communications officer in quite some time. We are a small district. I love the updates that Tamara's writing now. This is no comment on our need for communications or the quality of what we would get. My concern is about our priorities.
Go ahead.
First of all, I really appreciate your concern and your attention to this matter. I think one of the big questions for us is, with all the cuts that we have, where is this money coming from? Where do we get it? And I think the answer for that is that we had a become an unfortunate situation for us. Unfortunately, we had started off the school year with a number of positions that were budgeted that were not filled for a number of months, leaving us with some funds, unanticipated funds. So that's how this position would be paid for. In terms of what our priority, I think we take very seriously our district-wide goals, and communication, again, being one of them, is one of our priorities. Unfortunately, what we discovered that this priority was not aligned with our budget, which it should have been in terms of having our goals funded. And so how do we go about making these kind of decisions? I think it needs to be, at least my thinking, it needs to be based on what the board says are our priorities for the year. And that's my preliminary thinking on the question of what our priorities and why do we do what we do. And how do we move and make sure we just don't have rhetoric, but we have actions and money behind what we say we're going to do in terms of a focus. And that's how we go about prioritizing, because if not, everything would be up for a focus. So,
A couple of things, I find that communications, as Sarah mentioned, is so key to this district, and in particular at this time. And as a matter of fact, this morning I talked to a parent who was so happy at the communications that have gone out, specifically that Tamara does every 2 weeks with us, the board, that these are crystal clear communications. So this parent is super happy, and I know other parents that are really pleased with the work she has done. At the same time, I wanted to see if we could get from the superintendent and the staff, if you can picture and maybe not tonight, but what do you anticipate are the needs for this school year? Given the amount of money that we have, given the money that was left over from last year, and I would like us to be able, and the community, to be crystal clear, how much money specifically did we have from the end of the year that was fallout money at the end that I think the community still doesn't get crystal clear about, and we really need to communicate that. And then given this year, if there's been some positions that haven't been filled, how much money are we talking about? And then juxtapose that with what positions are we looking for? Do you anticipate other positions up? We've obviously have to have a discussion on a director of management and operations, whether it's director or some other. But I certainly know that the district's office is really trim, super trim in terms of the amount of staff you have. So that to me is a concern, because as we start getting complaints that this isn't done either from the school side or from parents seeing, well, hey, what about my kid, and I have this need and nobody's getting back to me from the district office, these things start piling up, as I think we've mentioned before. And so we need to be sure that we're really clear about what are the positions that we absolutely or what are the needs that we absolutely have from now to the end of the year? And if those could be articulated in some format so that everybody in the community can see these are things that we need to get done this school year, and this is the money we're using very specifically for this position and that position, so that as we go forward and ask for more money from the community to support us, we will be very clear about how we're using the money that we currently have. And the other thing I just wanted to note, because we were sent these notes, and from the community, there was a comment about, as we're considering the needs that the district office has, there was the reminder that, what about the schools, the positions that were cut or trimmed last school year? And in particular, there was a reference to the library technicians at the secondary level. And so I followed up by talking to school care. And the community definitely needs to know how terrific school care has just stepped up and done so much work in this area. Over $300,000 is what was allocated this school year to support the services that are needed at the school site. At the same time, it's clear that school care doesn't do district office support. It doesn't provide money for the office, for the district office. So we sort of have to balance, right? And that's not to say that we cut school sites and expect school care to follow through, but simply that they do support the schools as much to the degree that they can. And this year, it's a real shout out to them as far as the commitment they have made this school year. But I just want to be sure that given the monies we do have, that the district office is really clear to the board, first of all, and to the larger community as to what are the needs specifically for this year that you can see, be it 2 months from now or 3 months from now, that these are needs that the district is going to have. And so at the current time, given the monies we have, we would like to have this money go for this position, et cetera. Sorry. I know you're trying to get me to go. Keep going.
I have a few comments. For one of them, Sarah, you brought up that we need to make our financial position clear to the community. And there is no way that that's going to happen unless we have someone who can write that and get it into a newsletter. Because we don't have anybody at the district office who can do that. In the spring of 2018, I put together a district newsletter. I don't know if a district certainly not since I've been in Albany, had a district newsletter ever come out. And I got input from the site principals, and then I wrote it up, and a parent laid it out in the newsletter format, and it was published and it was sent to every mailbox in Albany. And I can't do that again. It's just not going to happen. I thought last spring it was on my list, but that easily takes 30 hours of work. And I can't do it and be the board president at the same time. And we were trying to hire Dr. Wells, in that same period of time. And it's not going to happen this fall. And for us to be able to communicate with the community, not just about the district's financial situation, but also about all of the ongoing facilities projects. And the community passed a $95 million set of bonds, and we've done very little in terms of telling them what we built or what we're planning to build. And for that document to go out, we also need somebody to write that and organize it and get the photographs and get it printed and sent out. Also, I think it's okay for me to say that somebody up here at the podium is going to be taking medical leave for at least 6 weeks or possibly more. And so we're going to need someone who can take the official minutes, which, is right up Tamara's alley, but it also has to be done in a particular way that it notes the legality of our votes and our resolutions. And so for all of these reasons, I think that, and with the commitment of the district, It's one of our 3 principles that we communicate and lead together, and we haven't been communicating, and we must. So I do think that it is in line with our mission, it's in line with our LCAP, and it's essential for our financial well-being and for our bond projects to have someone who can do this job.
I'd like to jump in and say I feel uneasy about approving a new position, and I know I'm a advisory vote, but from a student's perspective, being in the classroom and hearing a lot of teachers' perspectives on this, I would feel uncomfortable voting for a new position in the district office when we cut so much closer to the classroom last year, and it's not at all, a comment on your ability, Tamara. It's more of the principle of we cut so much close to the classroom last year, and there's definitely concerns that I have for students, but also concerns I have for teachers and the amount of work we're putting on them. And so I am recognizing the need, and I also know that we're going to be having someone who serves kind of, as some type of communications role in our district leaving for a little while. And at the same time, I'm kind of like walking this line in my head of which kind of consideration has more weight right now. The need to add a communications role because we do need that in our district, or the need to make sure that we're having cuts that are as far away from the classroom as we can.
Board Member Muller. Vice President Doss.
Oh, do I get to go before you? Because I was just going to say that you guys don't have to, validate your comments or anything like that. They're respected and appreciated. So if you have any opinion on anything that we're talking about, then just jump right in. And I can speak for everybody when I say that we welcome it. And so it's all good.
Board Member Maha.
Yeah, so I completely hear what everyone's saying, but I also think with everything and with budget cuts happening, there's also a lot of confusion with students and parents, and there's just not a lot of clarity of what's going on. And I was just talking to people yesterday, and they were confused about construction and who's going where and all of that, and it's affecting them, so it should be clear. So I think having someone that's doing the communicating is really important because it's not happening right now. Also, I was wondering what the format, if we approved it, would be. Would it be something physical or an email that would be signed up for?
You mean the newsletter?
Yeah, it would be an email. Or would it be like on the website?
Here's our thinking. One, we want to be able to distribute to every home in Albany, and also via email. And we would also, this would be a position and practice that would be evolving, probably based on input from the community and staff. And so we would use both email and mailers.
Okay.
I think it would depend on, there's a number of projects that are being considered. I think that I've heard mentioned some sort of a mailer about the financial situation. I think there would be a separate mailer about the facilities. I think there would be the minutes from the meetings. I think there would be a variety of email communications. So we're talking about a lot of different projects.
Yeah. I mean, also thinking about if we did, like the cost of sending something out in the mail, adding that on to the cost, we should be thinking about that. And like projecting it.
I can tell you that if you send it bulk mail, it's not very much. I think that, yeah, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was less than $2,000 to mail every household in Albany.
Oh.
Board Member Clark?
I'm fine. I was wondering if this would also include, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. There's like 5 more I could name, but
My response will be, it could.
Thinking more, I'd like a more definite answer in order for me to comfortably vote on this. If those means of communication will be included in the duties of this position.
We can certainly add that in terms of Facebook and other social media venue. It may not cover all of them, but some of the basic ones like Facebook and some of the most familiar ones that we are familiar with.
I mean, that sounds good because, you know, having the mailer go out is great, but I don't always read all of the paperwork, and I'm on the school board, so I could imagine that everybody doesn't read, you know, but everybody checks Facebook and Nextdoor, and oh, see, look, there's another one. I almost forgot about Nextdoor. So, you know, kind of, and I know that Tamara has vast knowledge in all of those different lines of social media. So, all right, thank you.
Especially Snapchat, right? Yeah.
I'd like to ask for, well, I'd like to end discussion on this, and so I'm asking for a motion. And this would be particularly for item 8-5, separate from the rest of the consent calendar.
Can I make I don't know what this is, maybe a suggestion. I'm still a little on the fence about this. I think it would help me feel comfortable telling the community why I supported this if there was some real clarity about what exactly the modes of communication would be and what the what the scope of work would be. Partly because if our argument is that this is a necessity, then I think we need to be clear that, for me, for example, this is not the time for AUSD to open an Instagram feed and start creating an active, spending time, appearing to spend time and money sort of creating PR if what we're really focused on is necessary communication. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know what the intent or scope is, but I would feel better having more specificity, I guess.
Can you form that as a motion to table and with a request to staff to bring back that information? Or does Dr. Wells, do you feel like, yeah?
I had made a suggestion, which was basically essentially to table it to our next meeting and give the staff time to come up with to show the district a plan for the monies that we specifically have, both any carryover or monies that came up at the end of the year due to positions not being filled, et cetera, as well as this year, and have the plan versus what are the key positions that the district feels we really need to have, and this being one of them. And then I would be more comfortable voting at the next meeting with that information, as well as maybe the additional information that Sarah mentioned about specifically this consultancy.
And I think building on Clementina's request, specifically for the 1920 budget, you know, for example, if we approve this and then in the following meeting, there's another request for another staff person or another new contract, I know you can't anticipate everything, but it would, you know, we've already had a couple of additional positions created within the 1920 budget year. And so if you could sort of lay out for us, where is the extra funding coming from for these new positions within the 1920 cycle? And what are the other sort of anticipated spending? And then this details about the scope of work. Does that make sense?
It's clear.
Okay, there's been a motion to table.
So do we need a vote on tabling?
God, I wish I could remember that. But it really, there's been, so both of you have, so Sarah, you're making the motion. Clementina, would you like to second that?
I thought I already did.
Oh, okay.
Just point of clarification, because I think I heard two different things, or maybe we should combine them. Can we
There's
take
one
two on this?
information request, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think that we need a vote on a motion to table. I think that it just gets tabled then. So then I would like to ask if we can get a motion for the consent calendar minus item 8-5.
I move to approve the consent calendar minus 8-5.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I just want to point out that as part of that consent calendar, now our student board members officially have the right to make and second motions. Okay, and that will bring us to the superintendent and board member reports. Given that, that we're already more than half an hour late, I would request that people keep these very brief, please.
Okay, some brevity here. This first slide, and I have three of them, was inspired with a one-on-one meeting I had with one of our board members who shared with me that although we have spirited debates and sometimes some differences of opinion on the board among board members, one thing that they appreciated about every member on the board is that they put children first and they care deeply about kids and their future. And that came from Trustee Jacob Clark. And so this weekend when I was at Ocean View, kind of minding my business, supporting the community in their wonderful efforts, and Trustee Hinckley was there. I was kind of intrigued with, or being baited to play basketball, and minding my own business playing basketball and using sports as a bridge to connect with kids. One of the teachers took pictures and sent them to me via email, and I just thought I'd share a shot out of exhibiting my skills and teaching the youngsters how to play. Actually, they were teaching me. So that's that, putting kids first. And Jacob, I want to thank you for that piece. Next one. The next one is just basically, I'm not going to look at the objective, but I wanted to be really transparent with the community about my 5 focus areas for the year that I get from the board so that people know why I do what I do. And one of the first 5 is our focus this year will be on student achievement. The second would be on the whole child, and you can see what the student achievement and what that means. And if I can get Trustee Weinstein to help me out, and if you could read the definition of student achievement for us, I appreciate that so much.
Provide a comprehensive educational experience with expanded opportunities for engagement, assessment, and academic growth so that all students will achieve their fullest potential.
Thank you so much. And for the support of the whole child, I won't ask anybody to read that, but you can read for yourself. But that's my second focus and my second goal for the year. And third, you can see, is the communication, and that's huge. And so we're going to spend some time bringing that back at our next meeting, as you heard, the board direction. But that's my third focus area. And then fourth, we have financial stability. We currently have a structural deficit of about $1 million, and we want to address that. And then finally, construction, managing construction effectively. And so in terms of us, how we go about considering our priorities, we want our goals to have teeth. So these are the superintendent's priorities for this year, and I wanted the community to know that. So thank you. And my final slide slide. I've had a chance to meet with a number of groups and stakeholders throughout the community in my 3.5 months here. Got to know people, wonderful community, a community that desire inclusiveness in all aspects of the area. And it really just got me pondering and thinking about how do we get all of these various groups that I meet with, meaning my Jewish groups, my African American group, my Latinx groups, our PTAs, how do we get them together and talking to each other? How do we make a really good community great? And I stumbled across this book that would help us create a safe place to have these kind of rich conversations. And it's a book called Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. Some of you may have heard it, but here's some of the things that he talks about. What we should know about the people we don't know. And I go a step further, in a safe place. So I decided to take a risk, and I'm a risk taker. I'm full of courage and sometimes foolishness, but I take that and full embrace, is that the superintendent and myself is going to have what we call a superintendent book club. And we're going to meet every other Monday from 5 to 6:30, time and place to be announced. But our first book is going to be Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And those folks who are interested, feel free to email me. If we get many, many people at our first meeting, we would break up into groups of 4s and 5s, and we would finally have that conversation about equity, race, and coming together and building great communities. So I thought I'd share that.
Thank you very much. Okay. That's exciting. The superintendent's book club. I didn't hear about it until this moment when everybody else did. Cool.
I'll give you one of my first books that I've heard.
Wow. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to skip my update except for saying that it was homecoming week last week. I was at the high school almost every lunch period for the homecoming activities. It was really a rousing week full of spirit, and I'll leave it to our student board members to tell you more about that.
Oh yeah, I'm real quick. The same event that Superintendent Wells attended, I was there, and I saw Trustee Hinckley there as well. Had a lot of fun there. The wonderful Ocean View principal convinced me to get into the dunk tank, which was really fun. I wasn't expecting to get dunked so many times. However, one of my old softball, I coached softball a couple of years ago, and one of the players from the team, she was there, and I didn't think that she was listening to me when we were playing, but as she was throwing the ball and hitting the target every time, I realized that I'm a pretty good coach. And then next up, my daughter got a chance to also throw the ball and dunk me in there, which was great. And she's been telling me about it since Saturday. So it was a great opportunity, and I just really enjoyed, getting in there, and the kids really enjoyed it, and so it was a great experience, and looking forward to a lot more of those.
Board Member Clark.
Yeah, just real quickly, I want to thank everybody who came together to make the Silly Olympics at Cornell such a successful event. I heard Kim was there. I wasn't able to make it, but my wife was helping out on Saturday even before, and all the other PTA members and parents. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to remember some businesses, but I know because I drove around and dropped off some of the letters, but Trader Joe's, Costco, and Safeway all donated supplies for the Silly Olympics, and there's a couple other ones, and I'm sorry I forgot them, but we do have a lot of support out there in the community, and I think it's important that we acknowledge the help that they did, and it's a great event.
It was fun. Board Member Hinckley.
I'll just add a couple things about the Ocean View Fall Festival, which was the last fall festival on the existing Ocean View campus. And it was amazing. So Jackie and Marie were there too. It was amazing how populated the school felt when it's been half empty all year. And it was great that all of the families from K through 5 were there, even though we're spread out across campuses. And also, Brian was in the dunk tank for a long time, and it was like 50 degrees and windy. So he definitely took one for the team. We appreciate it.
As everyone has really said, there's so much participation from the community. And I just wanted to mention at AMS today was the second luncheon for staff there, and the teachers and the staff really appreciate it. And it's because there are parents that are willing to contribute over and over again. So this already it's only October, and we already had the second one. And once again, I would just like to give another shout out to School Care. The total amount of money that they gave this year to help with positions at the school sites was a total of $349,400. So once again, that's a shout out to School Care.
There you go. Wow. Student board member reports.
At Albany High School on Monday, October 28th, there will be a California education funding presentation at the Little Theater from 7 to 8:30. We, as a board, are co-hosting this along with Albany High School leadership and the Albany Chapter League of Women Voters. I'm going to be talking there. Not too much. I'm just introducing someone, but I feel pretty special, so everybody should show up. As I had promised 2 weeks ago, homecoming week ended with the seniors winning, but all grades put in a great amount of effort with boys volleyball, girls football, lip sync, dress-up days, and more. And finally, the girls golf team, which Audrey is on, won TCALs last week by 48 strokes after an undefeated season, beating multiple Albany and league records. The top 5 players traveled to Eureka yesterday to participate in NCS as well. Yes, go Audrey, woo! At Albany Middle School, students participated in Mix It Up Day today, October 22nd at lunch. Students will be trying out for basketball and soccer teams this week. And today, October 22nd, was Teacher and Staff Appreciation Day. So as my own appreciation as an Albany Middle School student once upon a time, not very long ago, I wanted to give my own appreciation for all of the middle school teachers and staff and admin who made my middle school years a place for development and learning.
Okay, I'll keep this short because we're running low on time. At Cornell, they had a successful PTA movie night on October 18th, and they saw Missing Link, which I believe is a Halloween movie. At Ocean View, the community joined together on the 19th for the Fall Festival, which was discussed, and Marin looks forward to the annual Halloween parade that all elementary school students will also participate in their respective schools on October 31st.
So the policy proposals that we wanted to talk about for this week are surrounding the Schools and Communities First Act. We passed a resolution about it on our board a little while ago. Recently, Attorney General Becerra announced Thursday, the 17th, a new summary of the ballot measure that just had changes in dates and fair sharing between school districts, as well as provisions to make sure that small businesses weren't hurt by the taxes. And so I wanted to propose that we pass a new resolution, and then also, again, really push a high turnout at the How Did We Get Here California Education Funding presentation that's going to be held on next Monday, because it's a really great way for our community to get educated about how horrible education funding is in California, how we compare to other states. I think that we as a board have a responsibility to get a lot of people there, because we ourselves deal with the difficult state and education funding right now. And so, as a last push for that, I wanted to, remind all of us again to please get people there, and then ask that when there is a new name for the ballot measure, which there may not be, but if there is, if we could push again for another resolution to be passed, just as support for the Schools and Communities First Act, which would add about 11 to 12 billion to education in California. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I definitely second Michaela's invitation to come to the the teach-in, the public education funding in California teach-in. I've seen the curriculum for the curriculum, so that's very educational, right? It's going to be fun. Nobody's going to be sitting in a chair. Everybody's going to have a role to play. We're going to be up in the little theater playing our roles, swinging money from this group to Sacramento, back to the schools. So I definitely recommend everybody coming out Monday, October 28th, 7 p.m. at the little theater at the high school. Okay, and with that, we will move to item number 11, persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda.
Long time no see. That's why I'm not prepared today. I don't have a slip for Julie, but I understand it's okay. So an update. So there is an item here in particular that I'm very interested to hear about, so I won't comment on it just yet. But since you're in doing updates, there was something that I thought I could share with you as a member of the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates. This doesn't specifically apply to public school districts, but since public school districts sometimes have contracts with private schools to provide services for students with special needs, I thought I could share this with you. And this was from October 9th when the governor signed the bill to protect students with disabilities at non-public schools. And I'll just read it, because I wasn't prepared. On October 9th, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed Bill 1172 to protect students with disabilities at non-public California schools. The bill was developed in response to the death of Max Benson in November 2018. Max was restrained for an hour and 45 minutes by a staff at Guiding Hand School in El Dorado Hills. The bill updates current California law regarding the use of restraint and seclusion. Among its several provisions, the new law specifically requires that local educational agencies, LEAs, that send students to non-public, non-sectarian schools, NPS, conduct on-site monitoring visits, that NPSs notify the California Department of Education, the CDE, of any student-involved incident in which law enforcement is contacted, that if CDE investigates and finds that pupil health or safety has been compromised, to immediately suspend or revoke the school's certification, that an NPS serving students with significant behavioral needs to have an individual on site who is qualified to implement behavior interventions and more. The California Senate added an amendment that requires, one, commencing with the 2020-2021 school year, an NPS to submit documentation as part of their application for certification by the CDE, that the NPS will train staff who will have contact or interaction with students during the school day in the use of specified evidence-based practices and interventions specific to the unique behavioral needs students it serves, and require LEAs to verify compliance with this requirement. 2, ensure that the training shall be selected and conducted by the NPS. 3, require that the training be consistent with existing requirements related to the restraint and seclusion of students. The bill was authored by Assemblyman Jim Fraser from Discovery Bay and sponsored by State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurmond. And the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates has advocated for federal policy which would prohibit the use of seclusion and prevent the use of restraint except in very limited circumstances. And I can send the California law and regulation on seclusion and restraint, both prior to and after Bill 1172.
Thank you for letting us know about that.
Thank you.
Okay. We're moving on to review and action. Our first item is appointment of a student board member to the City of Albany Climate Action Committee. Staff, who would like to introduce this item?
Do we have a student here tonight? not just the student that being appointed tonight.
Superintendent Wells.
There's two. We have to vote.
Right.
Superintendent Wells, if I may, both students who applied were invited by email but never responded back.
Tonight, we have the good fortune to appoint two of our juniors who were selected from a group of students of their peers to join the Albany Climate Action Committee, and we're asking for the board approval to this committee tonight.
But we have to choose.
Yeah, right, there were two applications, there's only one position.
That is correct. And so the board is going to choose from the two folks that we are bringing forward tonight. You have the backup information, and it's up to you to select one of the two. So thank you for that.
I'm sure that the board has read both applications. They were both very deserving. It's definitely going to be a hard choice. I think that, I think that the way to do it, I mean, thanking both of these students in advance, and also pointing out that you don't have to be a voting member of the city's Climate Action Committee to attend the meetings and to have a voice in what the committee does. But with that, I think I'm going to need to ask for votes, and I will start with Clementina. And, yeah, the student board members, I assume, will, yeah.
I was going to abstain anyway.
Okay, so the student board members are abstaining from this particular vote, and so we'll start with Clementina and move this way.
Okay.
Oh.
Candidate or just which one?
Say the one you want.
Which one? Just say the one that you prefer.
It's tough, you know, because when students volunteer, for one thing, that's great at the high school, given their schedules, and the fact that they're interested is wonderful. But I did read a couple of applications, and I'm going to go with Sarah, because she specifically is engaged in a class on environmental stuff. Although Josh was also, you know, he's in environmental designs, which impacts, of course, the climate as well.
They're both in the same course. The EdSet program incorporates AP Environmental Science. So since they're both EdSet students, they're both in the same course.
That makes it even harder, but I don't know what the makeup is of that committee, but, you know, male-female balance, but I think I'll go with Sarah.
Oh, okay, we have a teacher coming to the podium.
So I'm sorry. So Sarah Choi is not actually in the EdSet program. She may very well be enrolled in AP Environmental Science, but Jonah is enrolled in the EdSet program.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. So Sarah notes in her application that she's currently taking AP Environmental Science, but it's Jonah is in the EdSet program and is also taking Environmental Science, AP Environmental Science.
I also would like to vote for Sarah. They were both great candidates, but I appreciated that she specifically mentioned her interest in environmental issues and what motivated her to focus on climate and human impacts and some of the issues that she was particularly interested in raising with the committee.
Board Member Clark?
Yeah, just real quick, these are the most difficult votes when you have student members who are willing to step up. Both of the applications were very well written, and I think they're both highly qualified. But my vote is for Sarah Choi.
Vice President Doss.
Well, first I'd like to say that in order to qualify to even be one of these two students, you have to be exceptional. So I think that that's commendable. I mean, all of the the work that we do in order to help these students. It's exhibited here with both of them. They're both exceptional. My vote is for Jonah Rosenblum.
My vote is also for Jonah Rosenblum, and I hope that both Sarah and Jonah will be involved with this committee. So I will call the vote, which is that Sarah Choi is the choice of the board.
You need to motion it, right? Move to appoint Sarah.
We move to appoint, thank you.
Member of the Albany Climate Action Committee.
May we have a second?
I second.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the board approves the choice of Sarah Choi for our appointee to the Climate Action Committee. Thank you. That moves us to review and action, item 12-2, overnight field trip, Albany High School to Close-Up Foundation High School program in Washington, D.C.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Superintendent Wells, Board President Shutain. Albany High School has been participating in the Close-Up Foundation High School program since 1975. When I was reviewing the materials that Ms. Hudson submitted for approval of this trip, it came to my attention that maybe we hadn't presented this trip to the board before, so we wanted to take the opportunity today, and thank you, Mary Flo, for coming, to talk to you a little bit about the goals and outcomes of the Close-Up Foundation program. There were some questions having to do with costs, and so after Mary Flo presents the information about the trip, I'd be happy to answer any questions about that piece after, but wanted to give a few minutes for Ms. Hudson to speak to the trip.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Mary Flo Hudson. I'm a teacher at Albany High School, and I'm really excited to be here tonight to explain the close-up trip to you if you haven't been familiar with it in the past. This will be my 4th time leading this trip, but my first time presenting it to the board. So before I took over this trip, I'm like skipping ahead like 4 slides here, but Dave DeHart had taken this trip for a number of years. It was an annual trip until the mid-1990s. When Congress changed it used to fund part of the trip, and they changed that in the 90s amidst a lot of other unfortunate cuts. With that, one of the people that came to me and expressed interest in this trip was a mother who wanted her daughter to go on this trip, and she went when she was a student at Albany High, and now her daughter is a senior at Albany High. So I did not take her mother on the trip, just to clarify. So with that, the Close-Up Foundation is a nonprofit organization whose goal is to bring students from across the country to Washington, D.C. to understand the city close up. So they do a lot of different ways to achieve that goal, everything from history to current events to seeing the government in action. So the overview of this trip this year, we would leave on Sunday, March 29th and return on Friday, April 3rd. We'd get the most bang for our buck. We would leave probably around 5 a.m. on Sunday and return probably actually Saturday morning. We'll take the red eye home so that we can get as much without those hotel costs on either end there. So with that, we invited all juniors and seniors who are interested in attending. The 11th and 12th grade social studies teachers talked to their classes and talked about it at back to school night. And then I had an interest meeting because I need to know, we have to, Close Up wants you to have 10 kids minimum to go. You have to have like a contingent. And I have floated this trip a couple other years and haven't been able to get 10 kids. And so this year I had close to 30 kids in that meeting, and then 16 kids returned the interest form that said that they were interested in being part of it, interested in being part of the club that will meet to discuss current political issues and also work to fundraise. And so on that interest form, students also indicated their level of financial need, which gave me an idea of whether the trip was viable. There are, about 600 juniors and seniors at Albany High. If all of them had come and all of them had needed a full scholarship, the trip would really not be viable because that would become my whole job. So I hear you guys want me to do something else too during the year than fundraise for a trip. So that's exciting. So the reason why it's juniors and seniors specifically is because all juniors take US history and all seniors take government economics, and the curriculum of the trip just really dovetails perfectly with the curriculum of those 2 years. I'm chaperoning this trip along with Michelle Lausheim. She's the Social Studies Department Chair. I don't know what's happening. Okay. All right. Okay, now the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the total cost of the trip is $2,200, which is sticker shock, right? It feels like a lot. However, that includes airfare. It includes hotels. It includes almost every meal. The only meals that aren't included are on the travel days, so airport dining, and additional snacks that sometimes kids need. But it includes tours, it includes tickets to museums that require a payment, and it includes the Close-Up program, which is a staff of young people. They tend to be, younger. They're all younger than I am, and they've all majored in political science. Many of them have worked as interns for congresspeople or worked on the floor or worked for the Supreme Court. Like, they just have these like amazing itineraries. Many of them have gone to school in Washington, D.C., which a number of our students are often interested in hearing about what was your experience like at George Washington or at Georgetown or so forth. And they run a whole curriculum with the students, so they are getting, it's so rich for them. And they even get to have a banquet and a dance, so it's all included. So I took a confidential survey to see where our needs were financially, and some students needed a little and some students needed quite a lot, and we ended up with, and then some students also indicated they would be willing to donate towards the cost of someone else's trip. And so we came up with the current need for these 16 students is about $4,000. So I'll start by applying to the Close-Up Foundation. They give a $1,000 scholarship to a student who qualifies for free and reduced lunch, and we do have a student who meets that criteria. So hopefully we'll get that $1,000 scholarship. I've also applied to the AEE grant, to get an AEF grant, hopefully to supplement for that. And then Donors Choose is an organization that gives money directly to teachers for specific things. So of course I'd need your approval first before I would go up on a public website asking for money, but I will do that. And then in the past, we've funded more than 2 full scholarships for students, pretty much just on bake sales and babysitting, where they do like babysitting events. So it adds up when you've got a lot of really capable kids who are inspired and motivated to work together to reach their goal. So that's the goal, and hopefully in the past I haven't needed to ask for site funds, and hopefully that would be the case this year as well. Also, a number of the students say that they're interested in going and they've never been to Washington, D.C. And if you think about flying a family of 4 and doing hotels in Washington, D.C., it would be considerably more than $2,200. So this is a way for some families who couldn't afford to take their whole family to give their child a really great experience, and then maybe a couple years later, their other child a great experience too. Okay, thank you. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this is just a little snippet of the itinerary. We go the whole time. It's like go, go, go. Like, I never worry about anyone getting in trouble because they're just too tired. Because it is like, go, you know? And the Close-Up program takes them on these guided study tours, and they take the teachers separately on those, and it's so fascinating. Like, you learn so much when you have someone with you who knows all the things. It's just really fabulous. So they visit the monuments and the memorials and the Pentagon and the 9/11 memorial, and then all the typical things. And then the Capitol building and the Supreme Court and the Library of Congress we will do as our own group, because hopefully that day we'll also get to meet Barbara Lee and Senator Feinstein, or Harris, you know, if she's in town hanging out. So that'd be really exciting. So I'll line up those appointments in advance. And then other things I'd hope to do would be to go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. That wasn't open the last time I was there. I know I need tickets in advance, so That would be great. The Holocaust Museum is very powerful. In the past, I've been able to set up a Holocaust speaker, a Holocaust survivor, to speak to students and have a lunch with them. So that's been a very powerful experience as well. And then the museum is another great site to go to. If you've never been, I recommend it. And then with Close Up, again, they'll do neighborhood study visits. They get to choose which different neighborhoods they want to go into and learn about. They learn about them first, and then they go and come back. And then they do national politics seminar. I think one of the most interesting thing about this trip for our students is the amount of diversity of thought, that they assume that all young people think like they do and their friends do, and then to meet young people who think really differently and to engage in conversations in a way that's structured and thoughtful and respectful is a really powerful, powerful thing. I just saw up there, so I know you have the hard copy of, it's basically my itinerary from 2016 that I've proposed doing again this year. And then I alluded to this in my opening, but this trip is sponsored by the Social Studies Department. It was an annual trip for a long time. This will be my 4th trip going, and I'd love to bring this back as an every other year trip to our campus so that all juniors and seniors who are interested could go on this trip. And I know that as things get more embedded, it just becomes easier. When people are like, oh, you're going on that, I heard about that, cool. And a number, actually 4 of the students going, I had them last year, and they bothered me all last year about it. Why can't we go? When are you gonna take us? Why can't we go? And I was like, so now they're going. And those are all my prepared remarks, but I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
For the amount needed, so for the 16 students that are going, 4,000 is the amount that's needed in order for every student that wants to go to be able to attend.
Yes.
And you currently there is 2,500?
I've applied for that.
Okay, but you're not sure if that...
No, and I actually have to wait for board approval before I can really get anything.
Push for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Board Member Duran.
Ms. Hudson, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions.
Yes, please.
And, in terms of the funding and how you work with the students, do you feel it really addresses all the students that might be interested but are kind of reluctant because maybe they just don't see that they have the finances and therefore they kind of don't even bother to approach you?
It's a good question, and it's a hard thing to ascertain the inner workings of the teenage mind. However, I don't start with the cost. I actually don't have the cost until the end of the first meeting because I'm really trying to figure out what it is. And in the past, I've had students say, I want to go on this trip and I need a full scholarship, and we've made that happen. So I would hope that that wasn't the case. I know a lot of these students personally. I feel like I'm a pretty approachable teacher, and I hope that they would feel comfortable talking to me. And then in the club, it's totally confidential who needs money and how much different people need. So they don't know. They just all know that they have to work together to raise these funds. And I think it builds empathy and inclusivity within that group, too, that they don't know. It could be, who knows? They're actually not fundraising for me, even though I just gestured to myself.
That sounds like a great process. Just one more question and, well, maybe 2 questions. No, 1 comment and 1 question. Just following up on that, would you be able to sort of give us just general numbers of, do you feel that it is representative of the Albany High School student body in terms of the kids that go there, in terms of an ethnicity?
In terms of ethnicity, yes. In terms of interest in politics, it's skewed towards kids who are very interested in politics.
Okay, great. And then I was just going to comment that I would hope that maybe, I know you don't have a lot of time and your agenda's full, but if you guys could make it over to the Native American Museum, because that's really our invisible group. We really skim over or don't even talk about Native peoples, and that's where the nation started. So hopefully the kids and you will be able to get over there.
Thank you. I would love to. I would actually, that's what I need. I need to go without students and just go to every Smithsonian, and that would be high on my list.
Board Member Clark, go ahead.
Would either of our student board members like to use your new moving powers?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Okay. That's exciting.
I mean, to put
Talk
you on the
about
spot.
civic engagement with students. Thanks, I thought it was funny too. All right. I make a motion to approve the Albany High School to Close-Up Foundation high school program in Washington, D.C.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous, so
thank
it's been officially approved.
Thank you.
We move on to our review and discussion section. 13-1, Measure LL Parcel Tax Replacement Ballot Measure.
At this time, we're going to call up our attorney, Lisa. She will, the board gave staff instruction to come back with 3 scenarios. And today we're going to review those 3 scenarios for review and discussion. And Lisa, please feel free.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Wells, President Trutain, members of the board. I'll just kind of give a brief recap of what we've done since the last meeting. You did give direction to staff to come back with a draft resolution with 3 potential alternatives to discuss. There was also a question of whether you want to bring a measure to the March election or the November election, because the March election is right around the corner and is really the one that's of time sensitivity. We're focusing on that today, and if you choose to move with that, we can do that. If you choose not to, then we would discuss at a subsequent meeting how a November ballot might look, because you're going to have some time between now and then to formulate what that might look like. So the main thing you have before you, and it's in your packet, is the March 3rd election resolution, and it's very rough, as you can see. We've got some holes in it that would need to be filled in, but the main things that we started with from the last meeting was it's the Measure LL renewal that would begin at the termination of Measure LL, which is in July 1, 2021. You did suggest a 6-year term. And you also suggested all 3 statutory exemptions be included, similar to what you had in your Measure LL. And also, we included the cost of living adjustment that was the same as you had in Measure LL. So really, the big discussion, review and discussion, is the rate. And there are 3 options that are presented tonight. The first one is just to renew the funding. And we had to work with that number a little bit because it says renew Measure LL. Well, currently it's at 318, but at the time it's going to expire, there will be another increase based on the cost of living adjustment, and then a subsequent one to get you into the next 2021-22 year, which would be the start of the new measure. So with that, that would be roughly about $24, $12 a year increase. So that gets us to $24 increase, resulting in a $1,572,000 revenue per year. So that's the first option to discuss. The second would be to renew the funding but increase it by $80 a parcel, and that would result in total funding of $1,950,000 per year. And then option 3 is to increase it by $130 per parcel, to get you to $2,200,000. Now, you had your poll consultant give you a summary of the polling that was done based on the different levels, and that was at the last meeting. I'm not going to summarize that now. I don't have that data in front of me, but that was presented to you with the 2 options. I believe it was the 80 and the 130. So with that, we would, in order to put forward a full resolution with the ballot text that you need, we have to have that number firmed up. And the ballot language also has to have the total expected revenue. That's why I read those two numbers to you. So that's kind of the first item of discussion. The second is the text of the ballot. You did have your polling consultant poll certain language, and that's what we put in the documents you have before you, is the language that they actually used in their summary ballot measure. But you certainly have flexibility in how that's worded. The full ballot text, you can, we took what you had for Measure LL, and then we just modified it slightly to address updates in the law that have occurred since you had Measure LL in 2014, I believe, is when you presented that to your voters. But for the most part, it's very similar language. So with that, I would like to open it up for your discussion and hopefully can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for that summary. Board, comments or questions? Go ahead, Board Member Clark.
I was just looking at some of the slides from the last meeting when they had the whole PowerPoint thing, and I just want to make sure I'm seeing it correctly as far as, I know we're talking about the three options, the current rate, the plus 80, the plus 130, and I just looked at it again. Am I correct in stating that the plus 80 was the one that polled the highest? I don't know if it can be brought up, but I'm...
Are you able to bring up the PowerPoint from?
It would be from...
October 7th?
Correct.
If I remember right, the differences between them were so tiny
We're
as
a
to
few
be
percent.
pretty much
I think it was 74 to 71 is what I just looked at, or in that ballpark. Yeah, it's that first one under 14.1, Julie. Oh, sorry, the second one. Sorry. I mean, obviously, I want it to pass, and to me, a couple percentage points does make a difference, in my opinion.
I think we're looking for page 14 of that. Yes. So the top line is the final test after the person being surveyed had heard.
These are all $130. This isn't the.
This is
There's a slide that compares them.
page 8 of 21, if it's coming up the same way for me. Yeah, so that's adding 130, so let's call it 72%. If you go down a few pages, you'll see what it's added with $80, and it jumps to like 74, 75. Thank you. Nope, it's just the 2 bars. It's not the 4 one. It's, keep going, Julie, please.
Still 130.
Keep going, yeah, there you go. So 74 and a half. So to me, that's,
But this is can you scroll up so we can see the heading?
that's with extra $80.
This is after they've had
After they'd heard the
Heard the arguments.
negative arguments, yes.
So the conclusion of the presentation last time was that the consultant was recommending the rate of 130 for 6 years. So if you can, Julie, put on page 19. Right, so that was what the consultant recommended at the last meeting.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
I'm just pointing out to me.
Yes,
those
you are
couple
correct.
Percentage points makes a difference.
Right, that is correct.
Okay, Board, this is supposed to be a discussion, so we can certainly go to any page of this presentation and
Can you just clarify for sorry, just know I'm shouting, so in the ballot language where we would put the amount to to which we were adding money. So are you saying we wouldn't put the 318, we would put wherever we expect that amount to be after the cost of living, or we would put the 318 knowing that?
That's up to you, how you want to structure that. The way it was polled was with the current rate with an add. So I just left it with the way they polled it, but you certainly could just put a lump sum with the two together. We have to be careful on the 75-word limit, to be able to articulate it the way we need to, but the way they polled it was with the current rate and an add.
Okay.
I have a question, and this is more about logistics of parcel taxes, but my impression was that parcel taxes were based on a percentage and not like a flat fee. No.
No, there was a lawsuit, Baricus, that clarified that it had to be a uniform rate per parcel, and that was interpreted as a flat rate per parcel.
I have some comments on the language, but not the short language, but the longer language. But I don't know if it might help us to move through pieces of the decisions. I don't know.
Well, I think what's facing us tonight is that if we're going to go for the March ballot, as the consultant recommended for various reasons, then we don't have much time. And so we would need to finally give instruction to our council about, tough items like the amount that we're going to ask for. And so that's the hard work of this discussion. But I think that as long as everybody is keeping that in mind, if we go through the long version of the ballot measure and consider those different questions that you're talking about, I think it might be helpful.
I guess it might be helpful to talk about the timing so that we know whether we're actually, what time frame we're going on following, so that it may not make sense to make a lot of choices about the wording if we're not going to move forward with it for March. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The one issue, the main issue that I have with the March deadline is, or the election is, do we have enough, besides the will, the capacity of volunteers to do this? I mean, from the way it was described at the last meeting, it really involves a lot of our really working hard at this and promoting this in the community. And so I thought I had read that the district office was going to put somewhat of a plan together in terms of all that it would entail. But I really think that that's something that, and it was made quite clear that it's the board members on their, when we're not in an official meeting, that we are just citizens and we should be the ones sort of spearheading this in terms of getting out there and really communicating to the community. So I think that's one thing that I see is important, that there's a commitment made from the board that we really are going to get out there, and that also we have to identify, I think, some key people that are sort of the head, first an overall chair, and then the sub-chairs that would be involved in this effort. So to me, that's the most important thing. Do we have the capacity to say, yes, we can pull this off in March?
I can speak to some of that if it's helpful. So Kim and I have done some work and conversations over the last 2 weeks, putting together what that work plan looks like, mostly borrowing it from the people who put it together 6 years ago. I think we have a clear sense of what the timeline of activities would be building up to a March election. We've started talking to people about their willingness to take on specific roles. We don't have, that committee hasn't formed yet. But I do feel more optimistic than I did 2 weeks ago about our ability to find people. I think there is one advantage to it being soon and a relatively short time frame is that people aren't signing up for a 9-month endeavor, right? It's a discrete time period. There's a set of tasks. We've run this campaign before. It's we, meaning people who've worked on these campaigns. I can't run this campaign as a board member. But I think there's enough collective knowledge in the community that can be passed on and picked up by other people. I'm also concerned about being able to get volunteers for the November election because I think we're going to be in a, and I say this, in a fight for the existence of our democracy at that point. And I think a lot of people will feel compelled to put their energy in that campaign rather than a local parcel tax campaign. So I think more time isn't necessarily going to mean more people.
Did you work on the last, you worked on the last committee, LL, okay. When, do you remember at that time, like at this point, before the election, before whenever we passed LL, if the numbers from polling looked the same as they do now?
They actually looked a little worse.
They did. Mm-hmm. And then, and that was before any efforts had been made to go out and talk to citizens about passing LL.
Yeah, I mean, they did the poll in a similar way where they did some education within the poll. But it was done, it ended up being done about 10 months before the actual election, so there hadn't been any sort of widespread conversation about it yet. It was a similar context, I would say.
Okay. Do you think that, because I don't envision us being able to organize at the same level that we did for LL. I wasn't there at the time when we did, but from like what it's been described, I don't know if we would be able to kind of organize as quickly as we need to right now, although I do think that we could still do a really great job. I just don't know if it could be at that level as it's been described to me. And so do you think that with the numbers being higher than they were for LL, with the data that was presented last board or 2 board meetings ago, but possibly, having the risk of not having a strong of like a lobbying effort from citizens to citizens, do you think that we would still be able to pass it?
I definitely think we'd still be able to pass it. I definitely would not support putting it on the ballot if I thought it wouldn't pass. I think there was a long stretch of education and conversation that realistically was still probably limited to 50 or to 100 people for that 8 months. And then that 2 months right before the election is when you hit the other 15,000. So I think even though it felt like there was more collective knowledge, really until you have people on the streets talking to voters and handing out materials. So I don't think we're that behind in reaching voters. We're definitely further behind than we were in building that sort of small circle of people with a deep understanding of it.
Were you wanting to say something?
I wanted to say that we have identified a co-chair for the campaign committee, and then most of the original committee has expressed their willingness to help. We haven't found another co-chair yet, but I do think that there's a lot of embedded knowledge in the community about how to make this happen. So I'm feeling more optimistic about a March date than I was 2 weeks ago also.
Okay.
For a lot of the reasons that Sarah mentioned, the fact that I think that September, October, early November next fall are going to be just crazy, and the focus is going to be away from local communities, and there are going to be several ballot measures on the November ballot that I think will be very confusing to voters. A couple of education bills that might even work against us. If somebody says, well, if I vote for full and fair funding, then I don't have to vote for this parcel tax. And they're just not. They're not going to do the same things. We need this parcel tax to keep the school district intact. Board Member Clark.
Yeah, we have quite a few people in the audience. I was just wondering if anybody has anything that they'd like to add to it. It always is important for my decision-making process to hear from folks out in the audience if they would like to speak.
Good evening. My name's Patty Fujiwara. I'm co-president of the Albany Teachers Association. And we talked about this at our site rep meeting, and we just had a few questions I wanted to bring up to the board. One of them was in the parcel text, as in the last one, you have attract and retain teachers and limit class sizes. And so as members, teachers in the union, in the district, we're wondering why, if this language is in there, why the district has not been willing to commit to better salaries and a formal limit on class size, despite the language that's in the parcel tax. So that was one of the questions that we had. Another one is, we know that the district gets state funding, especially for class size reduction, if we are at a 24, I believe, average. And so we're wondering how necessary it is for that to be included in the parcel tax language. And our last concern was what steps are going to be taken to make sure that that the construction is going smoothly between now and the election, because I think that we don't want that to be it becomes problematic. You know, all this. You know, as an Albany resident, I voted for the measures for the construction and how we're going. I want to ensure that that money is being spent for the construction, that it's all going smoothly and staying on the timeline. Thank you.
Before I hand those questions over to the superintendent, I would like to say that one way of informing everybody in Albany about how the construction projects are going would be to get someone to write a communication with pictures and architectural drawings about what's been approved. All right, so on to you, Dr. Wells.
By posting it on social media.
There was a number of questions there, starting with better salaries that I don't think was included in the, first and foremost, remember this is a renewal, not a new parcel tax where you add, well, I wanted to be clear on that. But the question around better salaries, I need more clarification about what the connection there is with LL, with the first question about.
I actually had the board packet there, and I was looking at the new language, and it is about recruiting and retaining exceptional educators in the district, and I think that is directly tied to our salaries.
Got it. Thank you. Let me hone in on the last one, because salary is a negotiated item, and so I'm not comfortable negotiating in public. It would be a violation of the law, so I'm going to refrain from that piece there. But in terms of recruiting and attracting the best and the finest and a diverse teaching population, it's something that is congruent with the board's direction in terms of what they so desire. So you guys are on the same page there. And we want to be inclusive and collaborative in this process because we want the teachers to be a part of this recruitment. You can't have a successful recruitment of teachers without having your teachers as partner in doing this work. So Patty, we would depend on you guys and joining hands and making this happen as a team. So I think that's important because you guys have great ideas that we want to utilize in making this happen. Construction, what are we doing to have it go as smoothly as possible? Let me tell you a little bit about construction, having dealt with it for a number of years. The best thing about construction, and my favorite part, is when it's finally over. Because you go through all kind of hiccups and trials and tribulations, and things don't always go according to plan. But we have, I think, one of the finest teams in the state, and we had very few hiccups. And we anticipate we may have more hiccups, but we're reducing the hiccups, and we also have accountability measures in terms of timeline, because if we don't meet timelines, there's financial consequences, so people respond to money, and that seemed to be pretty effective so far. And so just keep hoping with us that we get through this really soon. I think we're looking at about another 18 months, 2 years maximum. And so we're doing the best we can there. So thank you for the question.
Okay.
Just respond to Patty, a couple
Sure.
of Patty's things. So one is on the class sizes. This was for K through 12, right? So some of the state incentive funding is only for elementary. So, I think last time and this time, we keep the language broad to send the message that one of our goals as a district is to keep class sizes as small as we can. So that's a partial answer to that. I will also say two things about the teacher pay. One is that this is a renewal, but we are also contemplating asking for additional funds. So I just want to be clear that we can't just say, oh, this is only going to pay for things that we're already paying for now. We know that for this, in the poll, the issue of attracting and retaining exceptional teachers was by far the element that polled the strongest with the community. We know that our teachers are underpaid. We know that teacher pay across the state of California has suffered, partly because the state funds education inadequately. And we also know that our structural deficit, as we project it out, doesn't reflect teacher raises or increases to the teacher salary scale. So all of those factors are, for me, a driver for trying to get more funding into the district, is that we know that teachers can't afford to live here on the salaries that they get paid, and that we face an impending teacher shortage in our district and statewide unless we address that issue. And I think, unfortunately, we're put in a situation by the states where the only way to do that is for local districts to raise money on their own. So.
Now, just in the interest of moving our discussion along, I think I'm going to ask each board member, starting with the student board members, if they think an election should be held in March or November. And this is just an opinion, this is not a vote. Oh, okay, yes, before we do that, we should have all of the public comment. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joni Rothstein, and I am a parent in Albany and a current school care board member for the past 5 years. I was involved in the LL campaign a bit, but I do think that there is the will among the citizens of Albany to pass this measure. School care, as was mentioned earlier, raised $349,000 last year, but this tax could bring in, at minimum $1.5 million a year, which is huge. And I do think with the work that the key people played last time around, and the contacts and the volunteers that provided some support, I do feel like there is a high chance of this passing, and would encourage the board to really consider the benefits of putting it on the March ballot, because I do think that there are a number of issues that just people would like to be involved in a short campaign, I think, and then also the many issues that will be on the November ballot, and as people have said, just pulling people in different directions.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, Student Board Member Mala.
March.
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 March. Wow, so it looks like we have some consensus there. That's an amazing step forward. So I think that then the next big item, because I think that in our previous the direction that we gave to staff previously indicated that we wanted to have all of the 3 possible exemptions on this ballot measure. And so that leaves one of the open questions being, for what amount do we want to ask? So that's the big one. I turn it back over to our council if you want to comment on that.
Yes, yes. So this is review and discuss and provide direction to us to bring back a resolution for a public hearing and a vote at a subsequent meeting. So I think it would be helpful to have the discussion and have everybody kind of come to a consensus of what you want. Certainly, we won't be voting on it until the next meeting, until it's an action item. But certainly, we need to have something to present for the public hearing and the vote. So we do need that direction.
Does staff want to make any comment? Or if we have further comments from community members, we could have that at this time?
It might be helpful to hear, you've said this before, but just how we came up with the 2 amounts that were polled, what those sort of represent in terms of district need. Sorry to put you on the spot, but.
Are you ready? Or Ms. Kim, if you,
spending or
yeah, if you want to take a minute to pull that together, I want to. It seemed like when we started this discussion, Board Member Clark, you had you asked us to go back to the survey and to look at some of the numbers there. Would you like to speak again about what those numbers said to you?
Yeah, but before that, I mean, I'm in support of this. I want it to pass. Okay, we hired a firm to come back with some information. From what I remember, 72, 74, it's not that much of a difference, but I remember him saying that there's 2 categories in there when they add that up. One is definitely and one is probably. So there's a big chunk that's probably. So 2.5% makes a difference to me. I'm not a big gambler, but it's kind of like rolling the dice, you know? I mean, we ask for a survey, it comes back. I'm leaning towards what shows the highest percentage of people passing. But if the rest of the board, you know, thinks that that's not that big of a difference and they're ready to move forward with another amount, I'll support that.
Thank you. Okay. And maybe if we can bring the survey results back up on screen. I think that Board Member Clark looks like page 15, so it would be like Q10 at the top. Yeah. So
See the one in the middle, it's that 27% is probably yes. And the consultant or whatever his title was, that really stood out to me. If you go up just a little bit, it tells you what the green and the yellow and the blue and the red means. There you go. So that 74 is the green and the can added together, which is definitely yes and probably yes.
yeah, and you pointed out that the 74.6% was the most positive polling result after they were after they were informed of the positive arguments and the negative arguments. So it's the final ask for this amount.
And I'm wondering if that's not in fact our job then, Jacob, to go out and convince everybody to be, as opposed to probable, that yes, we're going to put them in the for sure category. I mean, that's part of what we do, right, when we get out in the streets and talk to everybody.
And I guess that if we go up one slide to, I guess, the Q9, this is asking for the higher amount, and they have the initial test is before they've heard all of the arguments before and against, and the final test is after having heard all the arguments. And then it looks to me like it goes to 69.1%. Okay. There was also a result for just keeping the tax the same, and that did not poll very well.
$80 polled better than leaving it the same way.
Yeah.
That stood out to me, too.
So
And that's why I was surprised his recommendation was the 130. And I forgot to ask him that night.
Which is,
It might have been because we're just talking a couple percentage points, you know.
but I think that's.
Keep in mind, these are samples, so there's a margin of error here that essentially those could be the same numbers. So just for perspective, in 2014, the final ballot test of an increase that was essentially what we ended up passing was less than 70%, adding together the definitely and probably. So it was right about this 69% that we have for March 2020.
And well, to me, what the keeping the tax the same polling worse than adding the $80 increase, what that means to me is that the community that was sampled is so committed to our schools that they favored an increase, which is really, it's really remarkable that we have that much support around here. CBO Kim, you found that information?
Sure. So the reason we had a survey for 80 was just to address our structural deficit. So we wanted to add $80 and see what it is like. And it will buy us another year to meet the 3%. And also adding 130 additional was also, let's see how we add another $50 and how far we can go and how the number looks like in our budget to address the structural deficit.
I wanted to add something to like kind of bandwagon on what you were saying, Kim, which is I think it is really lucky that we live in a district where we are able to pass parcel taxes and bonds. And I've been going to, like, traveling to other school districts in areas around California, and I've been talking to other student school board members. Recently, I was in Stockton last week, and some of the school board members around Stockton hadn't even heard of a parcel tax before. It just had never come up in their board meeting. So I think that it's really amazing that we're able to pass them. I think it's something that happens mainly in the Bay Area, but it's really quite fantastic that that's something that we can ask our community for and that they are enthusiastic about it. And kudos to Albany for actually being able to provide our schools with this money. Hopefully they do.
Yes, hopefully. Board Member Clark.
Yeah, just one quick one for our attorney. Are you here just to answer legal questions or to give advice on this discussion? Because if you can, I would really like to hear your opinion.
Yeah.
If you can't, that's fine.
Yeah,
too.
this is totally within your discretion, and I can't speak to the polling at all. So I was here and I heard the presentation, but I really can't speak to any of the details of whether, one's better than the other than what you're seeing.
Thank you.
I have a comment just on, to put in perspective our sort of overall need as compared to 2014. So I don't remember the exact percentages, but I remember going to meetings where we were, at that time, where we were having debates about whether to let our reserve fall below 15%. That number has obviously dropped significantly. When we entered the recession in 2009, or our recession in 2009, we had significantly higher reserves than that. I don't think I'm the only one that sees stories in the news that we might be approaching the next recession, and it makes me very nervous that we have so little reserves to weather, because we were able to do a lot better in other districts because we had such high reserves. So even, to me, the closer we can get to, as Jackie says, sort of buying time before we run out of money is significant. I mean, we already have trimmed so much in this district and have not been able to, compensate our teachers adequately for their work. And I think it's, the context that we're in now is more dire in many ways than 2014, even though we've had this sort of resurgence of state funding in a formulaic way, but not really in a substantive way. So that's to say, I think, if Jackie feels like that's the number that she wanted to put out there in order to do as much of a cushion as we can to be able to continue to deliver the same services we deliver now, and it polled as well as it did, I think we should push for that amount.
I remember when we were discussing and trying to figure out if we were going to complete this poll and use the company that we use in order to get this information. I remember that we had a lively debate about it, and I had some questions, and I remember everybody's response, and it was very, very thoughtful, and it made sense, and so we did eventually end up, going with this company, and it's great research, and they gave us a lot of information to be able to take in so that we can make the decision. I think that based on that previous conversation, and everybody was on board with that, and gave me a lot of great reasons as to why we should, use this company and why it was absolutely necessary for us to do it. Now that they've done the work and gave us the information, I think we need to, trust in the information that they provided and move forward with this. And as Clementina stated, do our part to make sure that the community knows exactly what it is that we need, why we need it, and do everything that we can to get this passed for our students.
So it seems like we're circling around the amount issue. So, was that? Yeah, I think we should go through, but I wanted to let the student board members voice their opinion on what amount we should go for. I think what we're really talking about is the $80 increase or the $130 increase. And then I wanted to skip and try moving to Sarah, because Clementina was on the spot first in the previous go-round. So, Board Member Millah, what do you think is the way to go?
I mean, it's hard to say, but I would probably say the $130 increase.
Board Member Weinstein?
The thought of not having it passed is something that is a little bit too terrifying for me to give my okay on. I really don't want to risk that, and so I'm going to go with the $80 increase.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to Board Member Hinckley.
Maybe after this item, you can explain our
Yeah.
presentation. I support going for the $130.
Board Member Clark.
I said it earlier, the $80 is where I feel comfortable. It really is a terrible thought of us not passing and losing by a little bit. And if that extra $50, nobody has a crystal ball, so we don't know. But the 80 is where I'm at.
Vice President Doss.
I think the community has shown, we mentioned the information about school care, where we reached the goal there. I think the community has shown with the high poll numbers that they support schools, they understand what it is that we need. As long as we give the information necessary for everybody to make an informed decision, I think that the $130 would be the best way to go. I do want to emphasize making sure that we give everybody all of the information so that they understand exactly why we're asking for that amount and what we're going to use those funds for specifically. We have a very engaged community that wants to know exactly what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. So I think that if we share that information clearly and have the consistent message as we move forward, that will be fine.
Thank you. I think it absolutely terrifies me, the thought of not having the parcel tax pass. But I also do trust on this community supporting education. And I think that if we do let them know that by increasing the parcel tax, we will be able to get rid of this structural deficit. That's the main thing that worries me, is that last year we faced so many meetings that were about cuts and who was going to lose their job and what we weren't going to be able to do. And I'd rather fight really hard in January and February to tell people what we can do and what we will do if they're willing to vote yes on this. So I'm going to say 130. Clementina.
It really just adds to what all of your comments are, and primarily that we're really very appreciative to the Albany community for its deep commitment to the education of the students here. And unfortunately, that's the way it is today, that the community families have to support the schools because there's simply not enough money for whatever reasons at Sacramento, but we know it's not being sent over to us. And so I think, once again, we have the community's going to have to make that commitment, hopefully, and support the schools once again in one of multiple ways that families do support the schools. And so I would, because it just will make life better for the district and in terms of following through on our commitments financially, I would like to go with I'd also like to support the $130 for the measure.
Okay. So I know this is so difficult, folks, and none of us have a crystal ball, and it's really putting it out there when we have to voice our opinions like this. Okay, but what I heard is that we're going to give direction to our council to write up a resolution that has the March election date, for a $130 increase. Can I have a motion to
You don't.
Oh, we can't, oh, of course, this is review and discussion, that's a direction.
Yeah, you'll be having a discussion at the next meeting when it's up for vote, so that will be reviewed again.
Right. And excuse me, Board Member Hinckley, you had a number of issues about the wording. Do you think it would be possible to take care of those offline, or those things that the board needs to give direction on?
I was going to ask you what would the process be. Mostly it was the findings section is the same as it was, and so some of the language just needs to be updated about the state funding situation. So if that's something a couple of us can work on between now and the meeting, I don't think they're sort of controversial items. It's more just we're now 10 years out of the recession, not 5 years, that kind of thing.
That would be fine with me. I saw some other heads shaking and saying yes, so I think that could probably be relayed between you two. Okay. Board Member Clark.
Are we done with this discussion? Because I had something else to say.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just a friendly reminder that earlier on we had talked about possibly pulling something from the agenda. We're 45 minutes behind schedule, and this might be a good time to look and see how the board feels about possibly tabling an item or two or three.
I agree with you. I think that I'm comfortable with having another hour's worth at max. That would be because we were scheduled to end at 10:20. I would like to suggest maybe, because if you look at it, Superintendent Wells has already done 14-4 to inform the community about his goals and objectives. So he did that in the updates. That saves us 20 minutes. I'd also think my choice would be that we table 14-3 and then try to get through the rest of our agenda.
In addition to that, Madam Chair, can we consider moving 13-4 before 13-2, only because we have a number of community members here tonight waiting for that item?
Yes. Does that, if everyone has agreed with that, I think that we've been here at the podium for a long time. I'd like to call it just a very brief 5-minute recess. Okay. Thank you so much. We'll reconvene at 9:37.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
as requested, we are going to move to item 13-4, Director of Maintenance and Operations. Superintendent Wells, would you like to introduce this item?
Sure. The Director of Maintenance and Operation, the rationale behind this position is that we are not only maintaining our current infrastructure, but we are also invested in almost $100 million in new infrastructure buildings that we have to maintain and invest. The community was very gracious and giving us an opportunity to pass, as you know, a $95 million bond. And so we're bringing this Director of Maintenance position forward tonight for review and discussion only. And we wanted to hear from some of our community members and experts who can share their thoughts and their rationale for why we should or shouldn't have such a position. And then I'm going to turn it back over to our board president for further discussion. So I'd like to introduce Diana Hayton, one of our experts in the area of maintenance and operations. If you can come forward.
Do I give this to you? Thanks. Thank you. My name's Diana. I'm a 15-year Albany resident. I think I've met most of you on the board now and district staff with 2 children through the Albany schools and 4 years on the Integrated and Sustainable Design Committee. I want to remind the committee, the board, about the resolution that the board passed in 2016, which set up guidelines for the new school construction, that they meet CHIPS standards and net zero ready buildings, healthy classrooms, high performance classrooms. In addition, that resolution went on to say that district staff should create and develop an environmental purchasing policy, which brings healthy materials into the school, the materials that you're purchasing, and a maintenance and operation program for the existing schools, including annual action plans for improvements. So as a member of this committee, I'm currently not aware that that has happened. So that was put into the resolution 3 years ago. It went on to say that there would be, annual assessment of those goals and reporting to the board on water and energy use in the buildings. And that's not just the new schools, but also the existing schools. So whether it's the new buildings or the old buildings, buildings are quite complex these days. They have systems that include fire alarm, fire sprinkler, air conditioning, heat, power controls, lighting controls, LED lighting, solar renewable energy sources. We have one building now that has panels on the roof, IT systems, security systems, let alone maintaining just the building fabric, something we can kind of understand, right? Roofing and building finishes, windows, drains, plumbing, that kind of thing. So these buildings are quite complex, and to maintain them and have them work effectively, we need to have strategic planning. And also people who know the buildings. So if my understanding is we've gone a couple of years without a facilities director, and I completely understand that you're making very difficult choices. So this has to be taken into account when you're looking at who to hire and how to pay for salaries. But we have 5 schools that are expanding, that are much larger than they were before. We have a couple of other properties. We've got a lot of landscaping and sports facilities, and I don't know how you're going to manage these complex systems without having somebody who knows the facilities and can plan strategically for their repair, maintenance, and operations. The community really cares about reducing operating costs. So if we can reduce our energy and water use in these buildings, we're going to reduce the district's costs going forward. And we can't really do that unless we can get involved in fine-tuning the systems, maintaining the systems, measuring the use, and working with the people who occupy the buildings, the teachers and the students, to really make it work. So we're here to support you, and and make this happen. But right now, when we opened up the middle school, there wasn't anybody to work with. You know, the building just, the project management team did a great job delivering the building, but there wasn't anybody that we as the Integrated Design Committee could work with to help you get those buildings going and fine-tuned and operating in a sustainable way, so let alone future planning. So it's a very important thing to consider, and there's another community member here from our Integrated and Sustainable Design Committee who I'd like to also have speak to you, if that's okay, who will also talk more about it from the owner's point of view. So can I invite Alan up? Okay.
Have a smaller page. Hi, I'm Alan Burkett, a 20-year Albany resident, 2 kids almost all the way through Albany schools, licensed California architect, 20 years on the owner's side, managing facilities construction and facilities management. So I'm here because I was totally surprised. So I've been on the committees on and off, capital committees, bond oversight committee a few years ago, and the sustainable design committee. And I had no idea we didn't have a facility services director anymore. So I'm here because I was surprised. And I think you need to find some way to have somebody managing all the square footage you have well and represent the owner and not hire that out to a consultant. So quickly, I work in a company that manages 90 million square feet, but they chose to not have facility services directors for 2 or 3 years, and it was a disaster, and then they rehired them because you need somebody to provide continuity and expertise to manage the buildings. And it's a hard sell because we have no money, but if you operate the buildings the way they were designed, you save on energy costs. You could quantify that. If you maintain the facilities, you'll get the useful life or more out of the equipment and not have to replace it prematurely, which is very expensive, and in emergency situations, even more expensive. And if you plan to do the appropriate plant maintenance projects in the right order, you can manage your budgets in a better way over time and not have rush projects. And finally, you can plan with the capital buildings to do them the way you want to run your buildings and not have that be just outside consultants. And it's their job to protect the owners and keep the buildings running. And finally, from experience listening to my kids, a well-tempered learning environment is crucial, and having kids come home and say they couldn't think because it was too hot in the room and for proper education. So,
Thank you.
having a director.
Who else do you want to have one speak?
Next, we're going to ask Yvonne Tom to come forward.
It is my pleasure to be before you. I have been bothering you since my son was in 2nd grade. And Mrs. Ujihara was my son's teacher. And he graduated from college. I'm so happy. So thank you, Albany. So I've been a resident for 35 years. I have a corporate background in real estate, managing it for large financial institutions. I won't mention the names. And I've been doing that for over 40 years. And I'm really old, but I'm still at it. So I was a volunteer starting in 2001 when my son was in 2nd grade. And I was helping, at that time we had a financial crisis, so I was saying, I will help you save money. So we saved $200,000 a year. We are still saving that money. I was running around getting grants, and the utility company said, I can't give you a grant, you're a volunteer. So I had convinced Dr. Wong, because you were doing construction, that he should hire me part-time so that I could get the grants for you and I could oversee your construction. So it was one of those measures a long time ago. And I also realized that you needed someone to do fire life safety, emergency evacuation, where are the utility shut-offs in an emergency, what do you do when the power is shut off by PG&E, what do you do if you have a water break, who is managing that process? Because I always had to take care of all the employees that were in my building. And it didn't matter where they were, I am responsible for their life safety. The other thing is you need an interface with the fire department. I met with the fire department. I met with the police department. When we did Cougar Field, I had to meet with Contra Costa County. Because your building is in Contra Costa County with your Cougar Field. So those are really things that you need. And then my committee chair said, if I didn't go back and finish, all of my committee chairs would be dead, so I had to quit, okay? And I did get my PhD. And we are still helping you with Prop 39, finishing up the work that you guys approved. But I also want to know, I finished getting you your garden equipment, your mower, free from Bay Area Air Quality, okay? And I would like to get water grants. But I need to interface with someone. Who do I interface with? That would be for leak detection and repair, placing with efficient irrigation controllers. I mean, there is a lot of money out there, and I want to get it for my town. Any questions?
No, but I'm sure you got 5 thanks out up here.
And he's not in school anymore, yay. Thank you.
Lots of thanks, thank you. Yeah. I guess I would like to ask Juan to come up from DCA Architects, our project management firm. We've certainly heard from the community members about the need for someone in facilities, and Diana touched on this. The number of systems in the building that Diana mentioned that are computer-based. I heard her mention there's the fire alarm system, there's the security system. I think I could add the door locks to that, and I'd like you to, any more that come to mind, and also what you could speak, how this person, this imaginary person at this point, would, what expertise they would have in that area.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk with you about this important subject. So it's hard to add to the eloquent arguments already made for this position, but I feel the same way, that the district and the community has made major investments in your physical assets. I did some quick numbers here before I got up. I think you are managing about 400,000 square feet of facilities. So think about your house, that would be a very big house, okay? And I think you are managing about 30 acres of land. So all that, it's just a large asset to manage. And it takes someone with the right background in terms of previous work experience, strategic thinking, planning, managing your different stakeholders within your different facilities. So in my mind, I think you would benefit from having a person with general skills in facilities management, working with your folks to make sure that things are working properly, that buildings are running efficiently, and that there's some forward planning so that you can make the best use of the limited budgets that you have, and you're not often in a reactive mode when something breaks or when PG&E shuts off your power on a weekend, and then people are running around, because that's costly. That's not a cost-effective way of managing the systems. And Diana Hayton was correct in that the new buildings have a lot of new, very sophisticated systems, from key card security. Your HVAC systems are very sophisticated. The district is supposed to be measuring the performance of your new buildings going forward as part of your board, not only your board policy, but to be in line with the spirit of the CHIPS rating system. So your facilities just becoming more and more sophisticated as the new building codes are introduced and you're working with new, more energy efficient systems. So currently my company works with about 25 school districts across Northern California. Most districts your size do have a dedicated person to manage the facilities and provide kind of that overall management and planning aspect to it. Often they will work with a company like mine, but it's a collaborative process. I really think the benefit of having someone on your staff is that they'll take ownership of it, right? It's like all of us at home. We know we have to take care of the roof and clean the gutters every year, and if the paint starts flaking off, it's time to repaint. I think you do need someone who's going to take ownership of your facilities. And if they were to need some assistance from my team, we're certainly there. There are other experts in the community that are going to be called upon from time to time. But I think what's been missing is someone that's on your staff that is really going to feel that ownership of your facilities.
Thank you. Board, comments, questions for any of our guests?
A reaction. I really, really appreciate the four of you coming and talking, because I really, as one person, had no clue as to all the things, the importance of somebody who would fill this position. So I appreciate you really articulating all the things that many of us really have no clue about, because we don't think about it, right? We just kind of accept that things are being taken care of, and somebody in the district is taking care of it, and oops, we don't have a dedicated person to do that. And so, you know, I had some not doubts about the position, but really to what degree we had to put monies into this. But you guys have convinced me, certainly just listening to you, what a great need this is. And however much money we put out for it, I don't know, but I'd certainly like your input as we put out a description for this position, what all of you feel are really key and what we really need in this person going forward. Sounds like a super person we need, but you can help us define it better, I think. That's what I would like to see.
Thank you. Board Member Hinckley?
I have a couple of questions that might be more for staff, I think. It was also really helpful to hear the details of the position, and especially how it may be more cost-effective in the long run. But one clarification for the public, I think, that might be helpful is what that this is paid for partly out of bond funds, which may be somewhat self-explanatory, but also that the other portion is coming not from unrestricted funds, but from facilities and operation funding.
Thanks.
So can you explain what that is?
Sure. So the 60% ongoing major maintenance fund is that state require that the district put 3% of our expenditures. So that is about $1.5 million to $1.6 million for us that we will have to earmark that money towards the facilities maintenance. So that covers all our maintenance crews, salaries, and supplies, any repairs, even vendors' repairs. So that fund will pay for 60% of this person's salary. And let's see how, so that is general fund, however, it's restricted because this is something that we have to take the money aside of our general fund unrestricted money. So it's designated for the facilities.
Thank you. And then my other question was, so we used to have an IT director, and one of the things that he was doing was IT related to installation of new systems in the buildings and so forth. But then also he was overseeing our emergency planning functions, such as they were. So could you, how much of that could be incorporated into this person's job, or how much, both in terms of the scope and capacity in terms of time, but also adding some sort of technology skills into the description, which I think would need to happen anyway, just given the sophistication of buildings. But overseeing the installation of networks, or we've had, you know, running AT&T to different new buildings, would this person be able to take on that to ensure that we don't have to restaff the IT director position? So can we think of this as partly resolving that shortage?
Short answer is yes. Albany was very unique in the sense of having an IT person do safety district-wide. It's generally a student services function in conjunction with M&O, so it's a partnership, and we want to move back to a partnership so that it's not a one person, but it's a team approach to health and safety for all our kids and staff.
Other board comments?
For the position will be funded 40% bond fund, 60% ongoing. But it sounds, based on what everybody is saying, that this is a really important position, and that it's a position that we need to maintain even after we're done with all of the construction in order to maximize the buildings that we have and make sure that we have them around for a really long time. So I'm wondering if there is a plan in place of, once this is completed, continuing this position on once we no longer have that 40%.
Thank you, Trustee Dawes. That's a really good question, and it should be, if I were giving my opinion, it should be a requirement, because maintaining this wonderful investment where we are responsible for making sure we have our functioning business buildings is essential to have this position as a ongoing, regular, stable-like position for the district. It makes, I think, too much sense to do that. From my, so that's my take. So I would like it to be part of our long-term plan. There's another piece to this that was mentioned, that this person is also responsible for the fiscal plans that we have or should have that we address. We call it our facilities plan from year in, year out, and implementing that as well, and coming with quarterly reports about how well we are maintaining our buildings and our next steps in big ticket items and projects. And it's also a communication piece that we're missing as well.
And if I can add more, so currently where we are is that we are fixing up the things when it breaks down, but really what's gonna really help us is preventatives. So if we can really move forward with preventative work, we can really reduce our cost. So that means we can hopefully pay 100% from the major maintenance fund by reducing other costs. And also, there's a few areas that I like to look, which is the vendors' cost. I know we can look for different vendors which are less expensive, and there is other. What I learned is when we don't change air filters regularly, we have more of HVAC issues. It costs more for us. So this person will be really responsible for making sure that we will do a lot of preventative work, like car maintenance, so then we can reduce other repair costs. So that is another goal that we are heading towards, rather than just repairing and fixing when it's breaking down or when it's broken.
Okay. And then another question I had was, what is, if we do decide to move forward, what would be the interview process? Would there be a panel or?
Yes, there will be.
And if the answer is yes, which I was pretty sure it was,
yes,
I would like to invite you to be on that interview panel. I know you're really busy, but I can't.
Yes, I'm really busy, but I am very, you are my number.
We're going to work around your schedule, because I don't think we can fill this position without having you vet this person out. So I really would appreciate being able to get the input of all of the community members that spoke today, because you guys all have expertise, and that was one of the things I mentioned in a few board meetings ago, is that it's really important being here in Albany that we take advantage of the resources that we have available in the community. And so hopefully you guys are available to help us pick the right person for this very important position should we move forward.
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
So the position that was actually eliminated 2 years ago was not a director of maintenance and operations. It was a supervisor level position. So I'd like just to know what made you choose to put this forward as a director rather than a supervisor, and what would be the consequences if we did it as a supervisor, which entails lower cost, as opposed to doing it as a director?
That's a really good question. One, as a supervisor, I think that we topped out at 108, and as a director, you're at 146,000. And in order for us to be competitive in the market with our neighboring districts, the director would attract the kind of skill set that we would need for this position. Folks with those high skill set would not come here for the significantly lower rate, and so we would get less competitive, and it wouldn't be in the spirit, in my opinion, of recruiting and attracting the best and the finest to do this very significant work.
And also I can add another thing to that. So when Yvonne Tom was our part-time director of facilities back then, and then after that we had a supervisor of facilities. And that position mainly worked with non-construction items because we didn't have a construction back then. So now we have this sophisticated construction project going on with a lot of new features that we thought it's more suitable to have that person also have more knowledge and comparable market for the director positions. Because back then, 2 years ago and a few years ago, we didn't have construction, and that was the position. We had a supervisor position.
Okay. I do want to make a comment from the board backup. The sentences right above financial information, I feel like I must bring this up. It says, the district has failed to maintain a few big-ticket items since November 2017, which forced the district to replace entire systems and/or do major repairs, some of which could have been prevented. I want to take issue with that. I think that what this might refer to is the fire alarm system at the high school, and the fact that the vendor that was selected to provide that fire alarm system decided to make that particular system obsolete a few years after we purchased it was not the district's fault. And then we had trouble getting parts, and then we had the companies refusing to install parts that were purchased, from other sources, and so I understand that, as Jackie mentioned, I think that we weren't replacing the filters on the HVAC systems, but that to me is very different than, this sounds like there was major irresponsibility, and I don't think that there was in the district. I think that the district has done the best that it can to be fiscally responsible and to maintain as well as we possibly could in the absence of having a facilities person. So I just wanted to, I just couldn't let that go on public record without giving my rebuttal. And I'd like to go ahead and end this discussion and move on if we could. I know we're going to bring this item back again. At a later date.
Just add one more thing.
Yeah.
Just wanted to be clear with this finance information. So when the person is hired, I like to have the person do the time accounting, meaning the person will have to fill out the timesheets, like how many hours she or he spent on constructions versus facilities. So that might be changed a little. It could be maybe 50% bond or 50% maintenance. It could be 35% or 65%. So it's not really absolute number there, just for the record.
Okay, thank you. And then I need to ask the will of the board. It seems like to me that given the time, it's 10 after 10, we should go forward with our review and action items. There's a few contracts on there that we
Madam Chair,
need to get to.
I was hoping tonight that the superintendent could get direction on this position to post it and at what level to post it or move forward on it.
Oh. This is a review and discussion item. Yeah,
So okay.
yeah. Okay. So it's coming back at the next meeting, yeah. Okay. So I feel like we've just been all over the agenda here, but if it's okay with the board, I'd like to move to 14-1, our independent contract service agreement with Carrie Blanche.
I just wanted to ask in terms of item 13.5, the California Healthy Kids Survey, is that something that needs to be approved or moved on quickly, or is it something that can be brought back?
The item doesn't need approval. It was coming forward as review and discussion, but the reason that we placed it on the agenda for review and discussion is that previously there was a request to add questions specifically related to climate, and then more recently there was a request actually that came from you, Trustee Duran, around the timing of implementing the survey, and the request was, could we administer in the fall? And so given that there were these two questions that were posed at different times, my hope was that we could have some general discussion and receive some direction in regards to whether or not we would continue to administer the survey as it is currently written, particularly the custom module, and that would dictate to some degree the timing of administering the assessment. We can move forward with administering the assessment as it is currently written. We have already placed the order and have the materials ready to be administered. But given that there were the two questions, I wanted to sort of honor both of those questions and give the full board and community an opportunity for discussion. But there's not a need for approval of the item, and we could wait until the next board meeting for some discussion.
And we can certainly come back to as much as we can possibly get to in the next 20 minutes. Moving on to 14-1, the contract with Carrie Blanche.
Good evening, President Trutain, board members. This item comes forward to you as a way to compensate families for the vacancy that was at Cornell Elementary, the RSP position, which has been filled, and we have a teacher in place giving services now. So Carrie Blanche is a retired education specialist who I'm asking the board to approve an independent service contract for her to start giving back makeup minutes for the time that was missed during the vacancy at Cornell. She comes very highly recommended. She had a great resume. And so she's going to work 2 to 3 days a week after school for up to an hour and a half each slot. I have not sent out notification about the makeup services yet until I had confirmation that I could actually employ her. So that is sort of the long and short of bringing this forward.
May I have a motion? Okay, first I should ask, does anyone have any questions or comments about this item? Okay, then, could I have a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve this item.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We will start this process immediately.
Yay, thank you. And that brings us to 14-2, recommendation to designate certificated employees to permanent and probationary status.
Yes, this is basically routine for our certificated teachers. Basically, they have a Probe 1 and a Probe 2 year, and after the Probe 2 year, they become tenured. And we bring it to the board as a formality, but the law basically supersedes everything else. And this is more of an acknowledgement of their tenureship moving forward. The process is that they're evaluated by their site administrators who recommend them for tenureship because of their successful evaluation over a 2-year period.
Okay.
I move to approve the designation of certificated employees to permanent and probationary status.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Board. That takes care of some necessary business. Okay. And then that brings us to the question about what we want to do with our last few minutes. We could hear the California School Dashboard staff report. We've also missed moving forward on the governance handbook and the California Healthy Kids Survey question that Assistant Superintendent Williams and Board Member Duran were just speaking of. Yes, Board Member Clark.
Yeah, so my understanding, the section with the governance handbook is just to change people's names, right? So that's just going to take a second. Well, sorry, nothing takes just a second. But
Well, and also to, I think that Julie prepared the Harold Freeman, the council that was there, collected all of our feedback and made all of those changes in the meeting norms and the protocols that that we went over. And so it would be a matter of glancing at those and moving to this item would be to okay those changes so that it could come back as an action item.
whatever the board would like to do. She wanted to say.
Sorry for the interruption. Board President Trutain, the California School Dashboard Local Indicators Report appears as a staff report. There's not a requirement that the board provide approval. However, there is a requirement that the board receive this report and that the information be posted on the public California School Dashboard prior to November the 1st. So this report does have to be made this evening.
Yeah, okay. So we'll have to go ahead with that.
Thank you very much. I shall make it brief. So every year, as part of the new and evolving assessment and accountability system in the state of California, we are required to report on local indicators. This is data that is not collected at the statewide level. This is the third year of providing a report on our local indicators. There is an attached PowerPoint, Julie, if you don't mind popping to that for me. The requirements of the local indicators are that we measure our progress, that we report at a public meeting, and then that we input the information to the California dashboard system. The reason that this item is coming before you a little earlier this year is that CDE is attempting, I think, to better synchronize some of the different reporting mechanisms that are in place. And so the California School Dashboard will start rolling out in the next month or so. And in order to be able to do that, districts have to have their information included. Julie, you can skip this slide. So many of these slides you've seen before, so I shan't spend too much time on them. But you will notice on the slide previously that we measure, the 5 local indicators that we measure are in the area of basic conditions, implementation of academic standards, parent engagement, school climate, and access to a broad course of study. So we can actually skip the next slide, which speaks to the process. And we can skip this slide, which just identifies the local indicators. So this slide speaks to appropriately assigned teachers. And in fact, there's an error on this slide. Thank you, Board President Trutain, for catching this. There is, where it says misassignments of teachers of English learners, there is one. The reason that there is one is that we have recently hired a teacher who previously taught in a different state where cross-cultural language and academic development certification, so that's CLAD, wasn't required. There is a process for the teacher to receive that certification, but as of the time of this report, the teacher doesn't have that that certificate. Teacher misassignments and vacant positions. We've heard now that the Cornell position has been filled, so I will be replacing the 1 with a 0 when I post that information on the dashboard. And then teacher misassignments, this is a This is a conversation that we have often, and there have been some different interpretations of teacher misassignments in my few years of working with different personnel and human resources. But here's where we have landed, that a teacher misassignment means that, as I put in the board questions, that the teacher is not legally authorized to teach that particular content area. So there was a particular question about 2 teachers who are teaching in a content area that actually have general limited assignment permits, and so they are in fact legally authorized to be in those positions. And so we currently in Albany have 0 teacher misassignments. So we have measured and met the standard for appropriately assigned teachers. You will see this information come back again in some form when sites present their school accountability report cards, the SARCs, which are due to be published by February the 1st. If we go to the next slide, which is around the implementation of academic standards, we have continued to make steady progress in this area, and we can go to the next slide. And the 2 highlights I think I'd like to point out is that for the last couple of years in the areas of NGSS and also history, social science, we have found ourselves, particularly around implementing the new history, social science framework, and particularly at K-5, we have found ourselves in the stages of initial implementation. And this year, we have provided professional development in the area of science and are preparing a pilot process for elementary science. And also this year, we're able to begin to provide at the elementary level some history, social science professional development. So we expect that the next time we provide this report to you, we will be able to move more of our content areas, certainly into full implementation is our hope. We can go to the next slides. We can skip this slide. Here. So in the area of parent engagement, we still are measuring the extent to which parents have input and are involved in decision making. And as Board Vice President Doss said earlier, we have a very engaged parent community. And so we are very fortunate, I think, that in the areas of building relationships, and if you could go to the next slide, Julie, in the area of building partnerships for student outcomes, and particularly, I think, in the area of seeking input for decision making, we have rated ourselves at full implementation. Now, certainly, I recognize that that doesn't mean that parents and districts are always in alignment in terms of their thinking, but I do think that we do an outstanding job in Albany in creating spaces for parents to provide their input as we make decisions for students. We also this year again will administer the California Schools Parent Survey, and that in the last couple years we have administered that, have gotten some good baseline feedback about our parents' thoughts about how we are engaging them, and we will continue to use that survey moving forward. We can move to the next slide. We can move to the next slide. In the area of school climate, we currently in Albany Unified administer the California Healthy Kids Survey every other year. And in speaking with our site administrators about the possibility of administering the survey every year, there was just a concern raised about sort of continually surveying students and not necessarily having time to implement any changes that are recommended that come forward. So as a result, what you can anticipate in terms of reporting on local indicators is that for 2 years, you're going to see the same information because we're going to be using the same data. So I'm not going to dwell on this because we dwelled on it last year, but it is there for you. And so we are preparing to administer the California Healthy Kids Survey in 1920, and at some future time, we'll have some discussion about whether or not now is the time to revise any of the questions, particularly in the custom module. So you can slide through all of these slides, please. And this information was provided in the backup, so I'm feeling comfortable going through quickly. And we can keep going. Broad course of study. So this is a new, this is our 2nd year of reporting on this indicator. And so how we have decided to report on this indicator is both to highlight what is accounted for in our local control and accountability plan, and also specifically to address the numbers of students that have access to what we deem a broad course of study, being courses outside of English, mathematics, social science, which are required courses. So we have tallied for you, again, gain this year, the numbers of course enrollment in foreign language, visual and performing arts, and also advanced placement in CT at the high school. One of the augmentations I think we're looking to when we report on this again is maybe some disaggregation of those numbers so that we can be thinking about equitable access for students in these courses. So that concludes the report, and I'm going to just say one last thing to you, and that is that given that the system is ever evolving, there's a change that we are anticipating for next year, and it will impact some additional reporting this year in 1920. So what is going to happen is that at the time that we present the 2020-2021 LCAP in June for review, public hearing, and potential approval, we also at that time will be required to present to the board the information and data that we will be using to measure and report on our local indicators in November of 2020. So this is the first of two local indicator basically updates that you're going to get this year. And again, this is in an attempt, I think, by the state of California to sort of synchronize these processes, right? We're reporting now on things from last year, but we're preparing to write something for next year. So I think we're sort of trying just to get in better alignment. So in June, you can expect to receive not this formal report, but you can expect to receive information around the data that we deliberated on in terms of local indicators in the development of the LCAP. That information will then be provided in a report in the fall and then be included on the dashboard in the fall. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. A few comments from the board. Brief comments, please.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent, you know, one of the things that strikes me or that I'm concerned about, for example, is I really look closely at the Healthy Kids Survey, and the numbers really drop as you move up, which there's natural reasons for that in terms of older kids being much more opinionated and et cetera. But I'm wondering at what point there is interaction really looking at these numbers and saying, we have some issues here when you have 51% of the kids at 11th grade saying, question whether teachers treat them fairly at school. 51% say yes. So how many are we saying don't feel treated? Is that 49%? Do you feel safe at school when only 60% of the kids say yes at the 11th grade? So my question really is, what do we do? I mean, it's nice to have all these figures, but what really are we doing with them?
So I would say that when the information is published, we do share it with our site administration and have an opportunity to take a look at the data and sort of track the cohort trends. In terms of sites sort of making decisions around how to act on the data, that is some information we could bring back. But I think the other thing I might offer is that given that now there is sort of a stronger requirement that data from the California Healthy Kids Survey and our other local indicators be really used to inform the development of our LCAP. And given that you are participating on the LCAP Advisory Committee, you can anticipate that we would bring this data forward to an advisory meeting and really sort of dig into it in terms of sort of what are the trends, how is this tracking in terms of regionally and or statewide, and what are some steps that we can implement to act on this data moving forward. So thank you for the question.
Other comments? Thank you. The board has received the staff report on California School Dashboard Local Indicators.
If we have like just additional questions, we can just submit them.
Oh, sure, anytime. Yeah. You might be getting some emails. Assistant Superintendent Williams. Okay, so I think that really concludes the business that we can do tonight. We're already a bit over time. I'd like to ask for a 5-minute extension to 10:35 for us to finish our business and start to reschedule things. Can somebody give me that?
Move we extend the meeting to 10:35.
I second.
Thank you. Okay. Going through the agenda, we missed the governance handbook. I'm going to ask for the board's indulgence on that. I think that the lawyer did a very good job at collecting all of our input, and I'd like to ask if it would be okay to go ahead and include that into the draft handbook that we could put on as a review and action item next time. So if somebody feels that their comment or whatever was not adequately represented, we can always pull it off review and action and make a correction.
Is that the better process? Because there were a couple of areas, I started really going through it, and there were a couple of questions I had, whether, specific revisions. And so is there a way, maybe a process where I could just send them in and they'd be noted, so it makes it easier for the board members when we review it? Or do I wait till then and present my questions or comments at that time?
Just in the interest, because our November meetings are so packed, I'd like to try to see if we can, because there always are going to be future revisions. We pinpointed a few things that we might want to deal with later in the spring. So I guess I'd like to try to push that forward. And I realize that it might not, you might not be comfortable with it. It might come off of review and action. But if we can present it as review and action, then we have the option. Okay. Yes, Board Member Clark.
So I went back and checked again. I must have missed it. I just see the yellow highlights with the board members' names being changed.
No, you're not. You're right. So none of the changes are in this board packet.
Okay, then let's just keep it as, we'll just move it as review and discussion, because the work that the lawyer didn't, it was because of the timing. The materials for this board packet had already been due the previous Friday for this. So Julie was going to show them, but you guys are right. Julie was going to show them on screen, but they weren't included in the agenda packet. So we'll just move this item forward as review and discussion.
Thank you. I was going to be upset if I missed it twice.
All right, yeah.
Are you talking about related to the two pieces that we've already, the two protocols, or you're talking about additional protocols? I think that is sort of a different discussion about when are we going to take on the other parts of the handbook.
Okay, yeah, this would just be the meeting norms, the governance norms, the change in the student board member section indicating that they can make and second motions, and then the two protocols that we dealt with together. But you guys need to see those. So we'll keep that as review and discussion. On the California Healthy Kids Survey, I think that shared in the board questions were the questions of the custom module that Albany uses. I also asked Assistant Superintendent Williams to see the custom module on school climate that the survey company has. And so I think that if it's possible to share those with all board members, so then we'll be better able to do a comparison to see, do we like our custom module, or do we like their custom module, or do we, and the benefits of staying with the module that we have been measuring over several years now. So we'll try to get that better information out on that before it comes back to us. And then, Julie, can you show the upcoming items? Okay. So trying to reschedule the items that we just discussed right now. I didn't hear any new items coming from the board that need to be agendized. But if anybody has something, please let me know now. Yes.
I know these last two meetings have been busy, and you said November's meetings are busy. I just want to make sure the PE waivers is not forgotten about.
Yeah. That is a November item. And we will try to, we will make sure that we keep it in November.
Sarah, were you going to make a comment?
Okay.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to, in terms of agenda items, one thing that I'm just going to throw out there, and whenever, but just a reminder that I'm very interested in possibly having a task force, or if the staff feels it should be handled another way, looking at 21st century learning and what that means for our district going forward.
I will put that in the issues bin, and we'll discuss it at an agenda meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so here we go. So I thought it would be nice to try to do this. There we go. So that's what we're looking at now, if people can see that. I don't know if it's possible to full screen that. There we go. Okay. So the parcel tax comes back to us. We also get our new Smarter Balance test scores that we'll get to see from last year. We have climate action and sustainability. I think that Board Member Hinckley and the students are working together on that. Enrollment report, efforts to increase enrollment. I think we're going to probably see that twice. The task force, the calendar task force comes back to us. We've got the PE waiver item, and the superintendent has put forward an item to see if we can get a plan to try to move the district office back to Albany. In December, we have one meeting. We're going to have the first interim financial report, which will be a big item that will take a lot of time. And then we'll also have the report on the pilot breakfast program. Yes, Board Member Clark.
Whoever's idea this was, thank you very much. I don't remember something like this happening before. Thank you, Kim. It's very helpful to kind of have a heads up of what's coming up. I appreciate it.
I just wanted to see if with the parcel tax could be included. I believe, Sarah, you had mentioned that maybe you and Kim had worked together to come up with maybe a work plan for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to see if after that discussion, we could really look at that.
I think the problem is once we vote to put it on the ballot, we can't talk about it anymore as a board.
Yeah.
And we definitely couldn't talk about a work plan.
When are we going to discuss a work plan, though, in terms of actually moving this so that it passes in March? I mean, at what point is this discussed?
I think that's what the committee will be working on. And then they can, I'm just pointing at the committee.
Committee, there you go.
And then they can come back to individual board members and say, as an individual, as an Albany resident, here's what would be helpful for us to have you do.
So you two never really put something together?
We put a plan together for the committee to work on.
For the committee?
Yeah. But once the board has voted to put this on the ballot, we cannot, in our board capacity, advocate for it.
Mm-hmm.
Only as individuals.
Okay.
Would there be information about what the campaign looks like that would be helpful for us to talk about before we vote? Because until we vote, or as part of the discussion, maybe we could ask a community member to come just present.
Let's think about that and see if we could get somebody who'd be willing to do that. And we'll have to probably run that by the lawyers, too.
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Do you need a ride?
That was a big meeting.